set with someone. Yeah, one thing to hold a grudge over one mistake. Oh, one mistake isn't much to make. It's one mistake, and you're sorry, you're so sorry. But it's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the sun can shine. Well, ain't it something to be in love with someone? Ain't it shameful when they do the dirty deed? Oh, that's one mistake, a mistake you can't afford to make, a big mistake. Now you've blown away the trust. It's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the sun can shine. Oh, well, it's nothing to forgive a loved one. Yeah, nothing to forgive and forget. 'Cause we all make mistakes, mistakes we never intend to make. I know it's hard to find forgiveness in your heart. It's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the sun can shine. It's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the sun can shine. It's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the sun can shine. It's just the calm before the storm. Someday the clouds will break so that the
Hey, everybody, how we doing? Merry Christmas. Sorry, had a little bit of dead air there. Something didn't happen like it was supposed to with this different software I'm using over here. Let me get my mic over here. Get the chat up here where I can see it. I think Mercury's still in retrograde, so I blame the planets. Or maybe it was just Steve Stockton. Pull the chat up here. Maybe. Well, thank you everybody for joining me here tonight. There's my chat. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Hope you enjoyed Lee G, First Floor Audio, Calm before the storm there. I like opening the show up with that. I am the storm. That's what somebody told me one time. Yeah. Maybe they were kidding me. I have to look up here, but I'm looking at the chat over here. Chairnator called it the clam before the storm. Close enough. Good to see everybody, 51 of you in here right now. First of all, I want to say hi to my lovely wife, Nicole. It's our first Christmas together. Had a nice Christmas Eve dinner, watched Christmas movies, cuddled up on the couch. More to come after this stream out of the way. So let me just go through the chat here. Again, Lee, First for Audio, thank you for letting me use that tune. Lee, you've got so many over there that I love. That one's one of my current favorites, and I just love opening the stream with that. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I see the bar is moving here, so that's a good sign. Kathy Evans, hi, how you doing? D-Rock, hey brother, how you doing? Kyrie, thank you for jumping in, wishing us a Merry Christmas. Rockin' Robin Bird RB, hope you're feeling better. Glad to see you here with us. The Charinator. Chair, I watched your stream this morning, but I didn't get to come in and participate too much. But had a lot going on today. But drop a link to your channel there, Chair. He's doing fabulous. He plays games over there. He's doing the Euro Truck Simulator 2. And that's one of the most relaxing things I've ever watched, especially when he drives at night in the rain. The sound, the song of the highway there, if you will. And his voice just lulls me into a perfect Zen spot. So if you need some relaxation about 8 o'clock in the morning, on the East Coast here in the U.S., tune into the Chairnator stream. He's over 200 and something views for that stream today. Wow, Chair. I'm telling you, buddy. Vixen Doe, another New Englander. How you doing? Good to see you here with us tonight. I saw that post or comment that you made on my blog post today about Yule traditions. Now, I haven't had a chance to respond to it, but that's some good information. Thank you. Who else? Vera Ray. Merry Christmas to Steve and Mrs. Steve. Yeah, I call her that sometimes, or call her Mrs. Stockton. But she's Nicole. But she's happily Mrs. Stockton or Mrs. Steve, whatever you want to call her. Who else we got here? Glenn Dannison, good evening. Merry Christmas to you and to everyone here. I hope you're all having a good Christmas Eve. It's already Christmas morning for y'all in the UK, I think. Oh, not quite yet. Or no, it's after midnight in the UK, isn't it? No, it's after 11, so it's coming up. First for Audio, I hope your son Bailey had a great Bailey Day and will have a happy birthday tomorrow. Riff Raff's making seafood soup. Wow, that sounds good. R.P. Skaza, Merry Christmas Eve to you too. Can't beat a Maine lobster, indeed. Gory Tiger, how you doing? April Sleester, Merry Christmas Eve. Hope you're enjoying that book. Ian Mysep, how you doing? The Sandwich Bar. Oh, I bet that was fun. Hello, Sophie. How you doing? Good to see you here. Faith Lizzie Thompson, thanks for being here. Laurie Smith, good to see you as well. Hey, Sandy Sizemore. Merry Christmas. Stephanie Blankenship, Merry Christmas to you there in Kentucky from here in New England. Anna Sapurek is here with us, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas Eve. Sasha Bell, how you doing? Did it ever get to be wintertime where you are, Sasha? I remember back in the fall when it was colder here than it is now. You were having a heat wave or something there. Lightwalkers from North Carolina, welcome in. Thanks for being here. I think it's your first time here, but you're only a stranger once. Thanks for being here. Nobody says hello, hello. You may be from the Belief Hole. Does anybody watch their premiere over there the other night with the Gremlins? That was a great show. Scott, how you doing? Nice to see you. I made cranberry orange bread in that bread maker that you gave us as a wedding gift. Thank you so much again. Lisa Lou, 212. Merry Christmas from England. Merry Christmas back at you from New England. Renee Cruz, how you doing? Oh, the chat's jumping here. appreciate y'all showing up here and on this cold and rainy night in New England. It's unseasonably warm. It's not the Currier and Ives scene that I pictured my first Christmas in New England, but as long as Nicole and I are here together, it could be 100 degrees Fahrenheit or covered in snow. It's all good. Happy to be here. Beats the heck out of being in the high desert in New Mexico. Tell you what. Hey, 50 Mike. Merry Christmas out there in the Ozarks. Stay safe, my friend. Joseph Adams, Jefferson City, Missouri. Rebecca Jones, thank you for being here. Blind Neil, thank you for joining us. Silence. Christmas in your own place in 4 years. God bless, or praise God, and thank you to everyone that helped me. Good deal there, Silence. And my first Christmas here with Nicole and here in New England. We'll be celebrating our 6-month wedding anniversary in January. Yeah, Glendenson Belief Hole are awesome. Love those guys. They're going to be on my radio show soon. It's coming up sometime when they get it back off their winter break in January. So everything out there is my radio show. It's on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. Last week we had Lee G from First Floor Audio came in, told some of his paranormal experiences going back to childhood. And I don't think she's here tonight, but Joanne, Yoda Girl 13, came on and told us some of her experiences. So it's a great show. I hope everybody got to hear it. This week, I have Paul Sinclair from Truth Proof. Anybody ever watch his YouTube channel, Truth Proof? He's also written 5 books and has done a couple of documentaries that you can find on Amazon, Wolflands. Go check that one out. It's about werewolf or dogman or something in the northern part of England. He's a Yorkshire lad and very interesting guest. And also coming up after the first of the year, Lee G and I we have a channel that Nicole's producing called From Beyond. Lee named it. And it's going to be a show similar to Truth Proof, where it's Lee and I, and we'll have a guest on, and we're going to talk strange, spooky, paranormal stuff. Looking forward to that. Josie Spink, Merry Christmas to you. Singing Turret, Blessed Yule from Reno, Nevada. I did a blog post today on my Substack blog about Yule traditions. If one of you mods could drop a link to my Substack, I would appreciate that. Hey, Ted Branston. Happy Christmas to you there, my friend. Far Out Amazing Adventures. Hey there. So thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate the compliment there, my friend. Moonchild, 51 degrees in Central Ohio. No white Christmas for you guys either. Let's see. I think I'm finally caught up with the chat. So what I thought I'd do here tonight, I'm going to do something just a little different. A couple of days ago on my Substack blog, I wrote about the Victorian tradition of a ghost story at Christmas. And let me read you just a little bit of that post. And I don't think I don't have it up here. Yeah, when I had to restart, I lost some stuff, so I'm just going to run with what I got here. Hey, Julie Van D, Gene Kaiser, good to see you people too. I'll just read it from you here. Yeah, Sandy Sizemore got my Santa hat on tonight. I'll paraphrase this here so I don't make you sit through the whole thing, but it's on my Substack. Greetings, dear viewers, as we embark on a journey back in time to the enchanting era of the Victorians, where Yuletide traditions were wrapped in Dickensian charm and flickering candlelight. Among the crinolines and top hats, one tradition stands out like a phantom in the snow, the telling of ghost stories at Christmas. Picture, if you would, a frost-kissed evening in Victorian England, where families gathered by the fire, exchanging gifts and laughter. But as the clock struck midnight, a subtle shift occurred. Inspired by the master storyteller himself, Charles Dickens, the atmosphere took on a more mysterious hue. Dickens, with classics like A Christmas Carol, planted the seed of the Christmas ghost story turning it into a Victorian phenomenon. Candles flicker and shadows dance. Imagine a time before glowing screens and twinkling fairy lights. Victorians relied on the soft glow of candles to illuminate their homes. As the flames flickered and shadows danced on the walls, it set the perfect stage for tales of the supernatural. The darker corners of parlors and drawing rooms became the haunting grounds for spectral narratives. The Victorian fascination with ghost stories during the Christmas season wasn't entirely new. It harkened back to older traditions, where winter nights were seen as a liminal space, a time when the veil between the living and the supernatural grew thin. Victorians, ever enamored with nostalgia, resurrected and refined this tradition. A little bit of the mistletoe and the macabre, if you will. Amidst the evergreen and mistletoe, the Victorians wove tales that blended the festive with the eerie. Christmas, traditionally a time of joy and merriment, found an unexpected companion in the macabre. Ghostly apparitions and haunted tales became a curious addition to the seasonal celebrations, adding a layer of complexity to the Victorian Christmas spirit. Why the affinity for ghost stories during this supposedly joyous season? Some scholars posit that it was a way for Victorians to confront their fears within the safety of their homes, a cathartic experience as they faced the unknown in the company of loved ones. Others believe it was a reflection of the era's fascination with the supernatural, seances, and a growing interest in the occult. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas gradually faded. Changing societal norms, the advent of new entertainment mediums, and a shift in cultural taste contributed to the decline of this once beloved ritual. However, the echoes of Victorian ghost stories continue to resonate in the works of subsequent writers and filmmakers who draw inspiration from this bygone tradition. In recent years, there's been a delightful resurgence of interest in Victorian ghost stories during the Christmas season. Contemporary authors and storytellers alike are reviving the tradition, paying homage to the spectral tales that once captivated Victorian imaginations. Perhaps it's a longing for the magic of a bygone era, or a recognition that, even in our modern age, the allure of a chilling tale by the fireside remains irresistible. In conclusion, as we unwrap the layers of Victorian Christmas traditions, the ghost story emerges as a phantom of the past, weaving a spectral thread through the fabric of festive celebrations. So, this Christmas, consider dimming the lights, stoking the fire, and sharing a ghostly yarn with loved ones, like I'm doing here. Channel your inner Victorian and let the spirits of Christmas past, present, and future dance in the shadows of the candlelight, creating a tapestry of enchantment that transcends time. Wishing you and yours a Merry Christmas filled with tales that send shivers down your spine and warmth to your heart. Now that's from my blog over on Substack. If you don't subscribe, please do. You're missing out on all kinds of wonderful posts like that. I look into a lot of folklore, mythology, strange tales called Around the Campfire. I think you'll enjoy it. And I'm probably going to be doing audio posts over there eventually. Let's see who else we've had come in the chat here. I can say hi to everybody. Don't want anybody to feel left out. 71 of you watching right now. Slow Boy Whiteboard, how you doing? Robert F., very foggy Northeast Ohio. Foggy, rainy New England here, my friend. Melanie Deisenroth, another New Englander. Hey, glad to have you here. Who else? See if I've... Mr. Betsy, Merry Christmas from Canada. Merry Christmas right back at you. And Far Out Amazing Adventure says after Christmas they're going to do planning to do a reading session, my own storytelling from actual books. Don't worry, I'm reading page by page, but summarizing the books. That's my New Year's plan. That sounds like a good plan. As a writer and a narrator, so I'd be totally into that. And Sue G is here. Hello, everyone from Erie, Pennsylvania. Erie kind of fits in with the theme tonight. And MusiLinks, good to see you back. You're just a little late, but we're just getting started. I just did the intro to this thing. She says, Merry Christmas and all the best to you and yours in 2024 from the Yukon Territory. Very mild there, which unheard of, indeed. Well, I hope some of you at least got a white Christmas. But like I said, I'm happy just to have a New England Christmas here with my beautiful bride, Nicole. But now I said all that to tell you this. I've got some Christmas ghost stories here. I'm going to start it off with one of my own experiences about a Christmas feather and a paranormal attachment. And then I've got some others coming up. Now, these are old, these are Victorian era tales. They're in the public domain, but it's me narrating them. I've got some good ones for you. And then to close out the night, I'm going to do a live reading of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by Clement Seymour. I've done that the past several years on one channel or another. Hey, Carolina Brown, glad to have you here. Kathy Gamby, hey, good to see you. All right, I hope everybody's having a wonderful Christmas Eve. Sorry, my nose is itching. I think it's the fur off this Santa hat. But I'm going to go ahead and play a video here, and then I'll join you back on camera here in just a moment. And again, this is called The Christmas Feather, and it's about one of my true experiences as a child. Hey, Jangles, I can see you now. Hello, Merry Christmas. And I'll be back with you right after this. The odd thing about this tale is that it's not an entirely unique experience. In researching stories and reports for the second volume of my Strange Things in the Woods books, More Strange Things in the Woods, I came across another story eerily almost identical to my own personal experience. The other person's experience didn't happen outside, so it didn't make it into the book. I'll talk about it toward the end of the video. When I was a child, our house in the Solway community of East Tennessee had 2 living rooms. What we actually used as a living room had at one time been intended to be a dining room, but we instead ate at a small table in a nook off the kitchen. The room on the front of the house, actually intended to be a living room, was referred to by my parents, my mother in particular, as the good living room. This meant that I was allowed to play, watch television, eat, whatever I wanted to do in the living room, but the good living room was off limits, forbidden, verboten, no entry. This was reserved for entertaining, or in the southern vernacular, when we had company coming. The only times when visitors weren't being entertained that it was permissible to be in the good living room was when I was doing homework and around the Christmas holiday season. The lighting in the room was very good, which was why the homework was okay to do in there. Now, in regards to the holidays, the large picture windows across the front of the house facing the street were in that room, and as such was where we always placed our Christmas tree for maximum viewing pleasure. During such time as the room was decorated for Christmas, I liked to go in and sit in the dark, the only light coming from the heavily decorated tree and accompanying windows. This was completely okay with my mother, as long as I didn't make a mess or put my feet up on any of the furniture. Sounded like a deal to me, and I spent many a winter's evening in the good living room, dreaming about what I might get in the way of Christmas presents. Life sure was good to a kid in the early 1970s. At least it was for this kid. The first time I noticed the anomaly I came to refer to as the Christmas feather, I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. I can remember being in the good living room, admiring the tree. My mother always insisted that we go all out for Christmas, and we always had a giant tree that, resplendent with lighted star topper, almost brushed the 10-foot ceiling. Add in yards of garland, hundreds of winking colored lights, dozens of blown glass, hand-painted ornaments, the whole thing dripping with faux icicles, and you get the idea of what the tree looked like. It was beautiful and a wonderful sight to behold. As a small child, it was not only a thing of beauty, but of magic and the joy that the season brought. So, while lying on the couch enjoying the holiday spectacle of the tree, with an Andy Williams or maybe a Percy Faith or Perry Como Christmas album on the console stereo, I was basking in the glow of the seasonal magic. At one point, I happened to roll over on my back on the couch so that I could watch the reflections of the lights of the tree twinkle on the ceiling high above my head. Suddenly, I saw something hovering in my peripheral vision just above me on the couch. I sat straight up and directly looked overhead, trying to get a better view. For there above me was a lone gossamer feather. Not quite 2 inches long, pure white, very fragile and translucent looking. It didn't look at all like the robin or occasional crow feathers that I found sometimes in the yard. I didn't know it at the time, but later in life I was able to verify that it was similar in appearance to goose down. Although we never owned any comforters or pillows or jackets or anything filled with down feathers, due in part to my childhood allergies and also due in part to my mom's germophobia. In fact, when I did find those aforementioned robin or crow feathers in the yard, I was forbidden from bringing them into the house and would also receive a stern lecture about how birds carry disease and there were such things as bird mites, and the feathers were undoubtedly crawling with them and I should go and wash my hands immediately. I watched the mysterious feather as it turned languid spirals in the air and seemed to float at random throughout the room. I would sometimes lose sight of it, for the ceiling was painted a brilliant white, only to observe it pop up later in another corner of the room. I would also like to take the opportunity to state that we had no furnace, no central air, and no fireplace. Again, due to my allergies, I was particularly allergic to dust. When my father had commissioned the house built when I was 6 months old, he had insisted on the fairly modern concept, at that time in the early 1960s, of ceiling heat, which worked via heated strips laid in the very sheetrock of the ceiling. Now, while not very efficient, since heat moves upward by nature and physical law, it didn't cause any problems with my allergies. Also, being installed in the ceiling, it didn't create any updrafts associated with a furnace or forced air heater, and therefore was not what was keeping my mystery feather aloft. I can remember watching the feather for what seemed like hours. I was mesmerized by the aerial maneuvers and the way it would do things like circle the Christmas tree, as if it either possessed a mind of its own or was controlled by some unseen hand or force. I kept the feather as my own personal holiday secret, lest my mother discover its existence and do away with it. Although there were times we were all in the good living room, including not only my parents but my brother's wife and children when they came to visit, I never observed the feather unless I was the only one in the room. There were a few instances where I boldly tried to catch the feather. I say boldly because it took a certain amount of boldness on my part to climb on the back of the couch and assorted overstuffed high-backed chairs to try and grab the feather, which seemed to always just stay in an 8 to 10 foot height range. My mother would have at least banned me from the good living room and at worst applied a hand swiftly to my backside had she witnessed such a transgression. The oddest thing about the feather was that I only saw it around the holidays. Any other time of the year, when I was in the good living room, studying for example, the feather was nowhere to be found, no matter how long and how hard I watched the ceiling waiting for it to appear. However, sometime after Thanksgiving, every year, as soon as our decorations would begin to go up, the feather would return. I saw it during its yearly occurrence for several years, but, oddly enough, the feather seemed to have disappeared for good about the time I turned 10 or 11. In other words, as soon as I was big enough to have actually captured it. Now flash forward some years later, I've never forgotten about the feather and the mystery and awe I experienced because of it, but I'm sure it was resting comfortably in the back of my mind. It was not the sort of thing I would sit and think about constantly by any means. While collecting stories for my second book of true weird tales, More Strange Things in the Woods, I'd spoken with a gentleman about my age who had some unusual outdoor stories he wanted to tell. I recorded the stories and thanked him, and as a matter of habit, asked if he had any other unusual experiences. "Well, there is one," he intoned solemnly, "but since it didn't happen in the woods, I'm not so sure you'd want to hear it." I explained that even though it wouldn't fit within the scope of this particular book, it might fit in another book in the future, and I'd still love to hear any tale he wished to tell me. He began relating a story about a Christmas feather, and a feather is what you could have knocked me over with as the story came pouring out, so similar to my own experience that it was almost frightening. As he finished the story, he began to choke up a bit. He closed by stating that he believed with all his heart that the feather he encountered was the spirit of his deceased grandfather coming to wish him a happy holiday. He even claimed that as a small child, his grandfather told him that when he passed, he would come back to him as a feather. I thanked the man for his story, gathered my things, and left. It was such a tender and touching moment that there was no way I could blurt out, "Oh yeah, that happened to me too," without a feeling of cheapening the moment when this man, really a stranger to me, had shared such a personal part of his childhood. Now, although I have no idea how he felt about the afterlife or feathers, my maternal grandfather passed away right after the holidays when I was just a few months old. Could it be? I've often asked myself after hearing the man's story. I can't say for sure, but I'm not one to rule out anything. If you've had a similar experience or know of someone that has, leave a message in the comments. Yeah, hey, Steve Stockton, back with you here on this chilly, rainy Christmas Eve here in New England. You see the lovely tree behind me there. What'd you think of that story? That's a true story. What happened to me and what happened to the guy that I was interviewing for my book. But how about that? Anybody here ever had a visitation from a feather? Stranger things have happened. Let's see who else is just here. I did give away some memberships. I gave away 5. I think Silence is the only member in the chat right now, the only person in the chat that got it with those memberships. But congratulations to Silence and to Jan Navorsky, Paula Litzen, Anthony Sir Moshe Bills a Gundam, and Todd Joseph, who got that. YouTube picks those at random. I had no control over that. But thanks for being a member. And also, since I'm in the spirit of giving here, I will add that if you are a channel member, email me, and I'll send you back a couple of PDF copies of a couple of my books, including Strange Things in the Woods that I was talking about there. Now, if you'd like to have a signed copy, hard or a paperback copy, I've got those over in my Etsy store. I'll sign them, inscribe them any way you want, even put some free stickers in there for you. A lot of you people in the chat here have ordered those books and received them and are happy with them. But I got Strange Things in the Woods. That's personal paranormal encounters told to me by other people. And then after I'd done that book and I was on this radio show or TV show or whatever, the host, or if it was a call-in show, the listeners would invariably ask, well, these are other people's experiences. Have you ever had an experience, Steve? And I'd tell one true story or another of things that had happened to me. And one day I thought, I probably got enough of those to write a book. And I did. That's how My Strange World came about. That's also a nod to Frank Edwards, one of my literary heroes in nonfiction paranormal studies. He had a book called Strange World, and this is My Strange World. And I've probably had enough since then to fill another book. I need to update that one or maybe publish another volume. And then also I've got over there volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the National Park Mysteries and Disappearances series. Now, it's not just disappearances, the mysteries part. There's hauntings, Native American legends, all kinds of stuff in here. If you enjoy my shows, you'll enjoy these books. And I've got everything over there, having a holiday sale right now on my Etsy shop. Lowest prices all year. It's less than you would pay for just a regular copy on Amazon. You can get it signed, inscribed, get some free stickers, and I'll ship it right to you from me here in New England. So, Sasha Bell, if one of you mods would post my Etsy shop link, I appreciate that. So, 74 of you watching right now. I saw it a little higher than that. Let's see who else we've got here. And Joanne, welcome in. Louise Haraway, another UK listener. Let's see who else. I know I saw some more. J. Zombie Adverts Revenue Wilson. Saw you here previously. Welcome back. Well, thank you, Louise. I'll tell Nicole. She's a little under the weather. She's taking a rest right now. But we had a good Christmas Eve dinner. Had steak and shrimp and some onion straws. And haven't had dessert yet. I made orange cranberry bread in a bread machine that Scott's Life gave us for our wedding. How about that? Ron Mig, how you doing? Merry Christmas. Good to see you. Laurie Smith, yeah, if you want to share those, send them in to Midnight Mailbox 13 at gmail.com, and I'll narrate those in a future episode. I'm working on episode 2 of that now. I may have enough room to fit you in there. If not, there'll be more coming up. I've got the first episode posted here on this channel. Also, it's over on Spreaker and should be on all the other podcatchers now. Google Podcasts, Apple, Amazon, whoever fine podcasts or serve, as they like to say. Let's see, Mark Demo, how you doing? Haven't seen you around in a while. Lolly Guzman, Merry Christmas to you from Nicole and myself, BDT. Merry Christmas back to you and your family. But yeah, email me and I'll send you PDF copies of a couple of my books. But otherwise, if you want the paperbacks, you can get signed ones over on the Etsy shop. Sydney Adnapaz, how you doing? Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us. Emma Rose, hello from New Zealand. Hi there. Great to have you with us tonight. Well, so I hope you like this Victorian tradition of a ghost story at Christmas. That one wasn't Victorian, but it was a ghost story for Christmas. There you go, Laurie, there's the address that you can mail those to. I'm going to do another one here. Now, this is a Victorian tale, a little bit of a twist, though, from your old buddy Steve. Not a ghost story, but a Victorian vampire story and a ghost story. You'll see when I play it here. I can't remember the author right off the top of my head, but it's called The Old Portrait. And I think you'll enjoy it. It's an old Victorian era story in the public domain and my telling of it. So sit back, relax, cuddle up by the fire there, and here's another spooky story in the tradition of Victorian spooky story for Halloween. I'll be right back with you after this story. Enjoy, everybody. Merry Christmas. Old-fashioned frames are a hobby of mine. I'm always on the prowl amongst the framers and dealers in curiosities for something quaint and unique in picture frames. I don't care much for what is inside them. For being a painter, it is my fancy to get the frames first and then paint a picture which I think suits their probable history and design. In this way, I get some curious and I think also some original ideas. One day in December, about a week before Christmas, I picked up a fine but dilapidated specimen of wood carving in a shop near Soho. The gilding had been worn nearly away, and 3 of the corners broken off. Yet as there was one of the corners still left, I hoped to be able to repair the others from it. As for the canvas inside the frame, it was so smothered with dirt and time stains that I could only distinguish that it had been a very badly painted likeness of some sort, of some commonplace person, daubed in by a poor pot-boiling painter to fill the second-hand frame which his patron may have picked up cheaply as I had done after him. But as the frame was all right, I took the spoiled canvas along with it, thinking it might come in handy. For the next few days, my hands were full of work of one kind and another, so that it was only on Christmas Eve that I found myself at liberty to examine my purchase, which had been lying with its face to the wall since I had brought it to my studio. Having nothing to do on this night and not in the mood to go out, I got my picture and frame from the corner and laying them upon the table, with a sponge, basin of water, and some soap, I began to wash so that I might see them the better. They're in a terrible mess, and I think I used the best part of a packet of soap powder and had to change the water almost a dozen times before the pattern began to show up on the frame, and the portrait within it asserted its awful crudeness, vile drawing, and intense vulgarity. It was the bloated, piggish visage of a publican, clearly, with a plentiful supply of jewelry displayed, as is usual with such masterpieces, where the features are not considered of so much importance as a strict fidelity in the depicting of such articles as watch guards and seals, finger rings, and breast pins. These were all there, as natural and hard as a reality. The frame delighted me, and the picture satisfied me that I had not cheated the dealer with my price, and I was looking at the monstrosity as the gaslight beat full upon it, and wondering how the owner could be pleased with himself as thus depicted, when something about the background attracted my attention. A slight marking underneath the thin coating, as if the portrait had been painted over some other subject. It was not much, certainly, yet enough to make me rush over to my cupboard where I kept my spirits of wine and turpentine, with which, and a plentiful supply of rags, I began to demolish the publican ruthlessly in the vague hope that I might find something worth looking at underneath. A slow process that was, as well as a delicate one, so that it was close upon midnight before the gold cable rings and vermilion visage disappeared, and another picture loomed up before me. Then, giving it a final wash-over, I wiped it dry and set it in a good light on my easel, while I filled and lit my pipe, and then sat down to have a look at it. What had I liberated from that vile prison of crude paint? For I did not require to set it up to know that this bungler of the brush had covered and defiled a work as far beyond his comprehension as the clouds are from the caterpillar. The bust and head of a young woman of uncertain age merged within a gloom of rich accessories painted as only a master hand can paint who is above asserting his knowledge and who has learnt to cover his technique. It was as perfect and natural in its somber yet quiet dignity as if it had come from the brush of Moroni. A face and neck perfectly colorless in their pallid whiteness, with the shadows so artfully managed that they could not be seen, and for this quality would have delighted the strong-minded Queen Bess. At first, as I looked, I saw in the center of a vague darkness a dim patch of gray gloom that drifted into the shadow. Then the grayness appeared to grow lighter as I sat from it and leaned back in my chair until the features stole out softly and became clear and definite, while the figure stood out from the background as if tangible. Although having watched it, I knew that it had been smoothly painted. An intent face with delicate nose, well-shaped although bloodless lips, and eyes like dark caverns without a spark of light in them. The hair loose about the head and oval cheeks, massive, silky-textured, jet-black and lusterless, which hid the upper portion of her brow with the ears and fell in straight, indefinite waves over the left breast, leaving the right portion of the transparent neck exposed. The dress and background were symphonies of ebony, yet full of subtle coloring and masterly feeling. A dress of rich brocaded velvet with a background that represented vast receding space, wondrously suggestive and awe-inspiring. I noticed that the pallid lips were parted slightly and showed a glimpse of the upper front teeth, which added to the intent expression of the face. A short upper lip, which curled upward, with the underlip full and sensuous, or rather, if color had been in it, would have been so. It was an eerie-looking face that I had resurrected on this midnight hour of Christmas Eve. In its passive pallidity, it looked as if the blood had been drained from the body, and that I was gazing upon an open-eyed, exquisite corpse. The frame, also, I noticed for the first time, in its details appeared to have been designed with the intention of carrying out the idea of life in death. What had before looked like scrollwork of flowers and fruit were loathsome snake-like worms twined amongst charnel house bones which they half covered in a decorative fashion. A hideous design in spite of its cunning workmanship that made me shudder and wish that I'd left the cleaning to be done by daylight. Now, I'm not at all of a nervous temperament and would have laughed had anyone told me that I was afraid. And yet, as I sat here alone with that portrait opposite to me in this solitary studio away from all human contact, for none of the other studios were tenanted on this night and the janitor had gone on his holiday, I wished that I'd spent my evening in a more congenial manner, for in spite of a good fire in the stove and the brilliant gas, that intent face and those haunting eyes were exercising a strange influence upon me. I heard the clocks from the different steeples chime out the last hour of the day, one after the other, like echoes taking up the refrain and dying away in the distance. And still I sat spellbound, looking at that weird picture, with my neglected pipe in my hand and a strange lassitude creeping over me. It was the eyes which fixed me now with the unfathomable depths and absorbing intensity. They gave out no light, but seemed to draw my soul into them, and with it my life and strength as I lay inert before them, until overpowered, I lost consciousness and dreamt. I thought that the frame was still on the easel with the canvas, but the woman had stepped from them and was approaching me with a floating motion, leaving behind her a vault filled with coffins, some of them shut down whilst others lay or stood upright and open, showing the grisly contents in their decaying and stained cerements. I could only see her head and shoulders with the somber drapery of the upper portion and the inky wealth of hair hanging round. She was with me now, that pallid face touching my face and those cold, bloodless lips glued to mine with a close, lingering kiss, while the soft black hair covered me like a cloud and thrilled me through and through with a delicious thrill that, whilst it made me grow faint, intoxicated me with delight. As I breathed, she seemed to absorb it quickly into herself, giving me back nothing, getting stronger as I was becoming weaker, while the warmth of my contact passed into her and made her palpitate with vitality. And all at once, the horror of approaching death seized upon me, and with a frantic effort, I flung her from me and started up from my chair, dazed for a moment and uncertain where I was. Then consciousness returned, and I looked round wildly. The gas was still blazing brightly, while the fire burned ruddy in the stove. By the timepiece on the mantel, I could see that it was 12:30. Picture and frame were still on the easel, Only as I looked at them, the portrait had changed. A hectic flush was on the cheeks, while the eyes glittered with life, and the sensuous lips were red and ripe-looking with a drop of blood still upon the nether one. In a frenzy of horror, I seized my scraping knife and slashed out the vampire picture. Then, tearing the mutilated fragments out, I crammed them into my stove and watched them frizzle with savage delight. I have that frame still, but I have not yet had courage to paint a suitable subject for it. Hello once again, and Merry Christmas. How you doing, folks? Glad you're here with us tonight. Are you enjoying these spooky Christmas? Start say Halloween, spooky. I'll get it right in a minute. That's easier for you to say, Steve. These spooky Christmas stories in the Dickensian tradition, or the Victorian tradition, rather, of a ghost story. Although that was more of a vampire story, I think, at Christmas. That was written by Mr. Hume Nesbitt. Born in Scotland and then migrated to Australia. Published that short story in 1900. So 123 years old for you right there, and still just as chilling today. Maybe even more so than it was back then. Let's see who else we've had come in. Tuesday, congratulations on your marriage there. Hope you enjoy each other's company and life together as much as Nicole and I are loving being together. SJ, how you doing? Donnie Brandy, Merry Christmas. Nicole sends her Christmas wishes as well. Blondie, how you doing? Good to see you here. I think let me just scroll down now. I had to back up a little way there. Chat was flying by. Allison Berry, how you doing? Welcome in. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Grey Wolf Paranormal, Lindsay, how you doing? Merry Christmas to you as well. Ralph Franco, did I say? Merry Christmas to you. Thank you. From Nicole and myself, blessed beyond measure. We already are, sir, but thank you. And Albuquerque, New Mexico. Passed through there once on my way when I moved from Orlando to Las Vegas, and then I flew out of Albuquerque when I moved here. I used to live in Farmington. Don't miss the high desert. I love it here in New England. I'm a New Englander at heart, always have been, always felt a pull to this area, even as a child, although that was Maine, and I'll probably still end up in Maine someday. Hey, Jangles, welcome back. Margaret Johnson, I'm not sure if I said hi to you. Malone, how you doing? Henderson, Texas. Area code 903. I guess that's what that 903 is, but Merry Christmas to you. D. Banks, Tampa, Florida. Merry Christmas to you. It's like I'm caught up in the chat. Again, I hope you're enjoying these, the Victorian tradition of a ghost story at Christmas here on Christmas Eve. Thought I'd do something just a little different tonight. Saw a couple of you have signed up for my blog. Here, if you like the type of reading or the writing that I was reading there before I started showing the videos, that's the kind of stuff you'll find over on my blog. I'm Around the Campfire, stevestockton.substack.com. One of you mods can drop a link, that'd be great. And hi to all the channel members here. I'm just love each and every one of you. And again, send me your email address, stevestockton81@gmail.com, and I'll send you some PDF copies of some of my books that I'm talking about. And again, if you want paperback, signed, and inscribed copies, don't miss the blowout sale that I'm having for the holidays over on the Etsy shop. And I saw the link in there. Allie Reed, how you doing? All the way from Edinburgh, Scotland. Good to see you. Have at least one of your countrymen in here with us. The Chairnator is in Scotland. Love all my UK peeps and down under peeps and anywhere in the world peeps. I'm glad to have you join me here tonight on this cold, somewhat cold and rainy Christmas Eve in New England. I wish it was snowy, but no courier knives this year. Sorry, I'm going to have to take a drink of water. I'm making my eyes water here. I've got a tickle in my throat. I'm going to go ahead and, well, Margaret, you're quite welcome. Lisa Lou, oh, you love it? Just something about a ghost story at Christmas. And if you think about it, A Christmas Carol, which everybody knows and has seen, the different versions of that, that was a ghost story. The ghosts of past, present, and future Christmas. Charles Dickens. Faith Lizzie, yes, please. Those will be on the Midnight Mailbox stream. You can send those to midnightmailbox13@gmail.com, all these email addresses, or you can just send it to me directly at Steve Stockton 81 at gmail.com. Well, no problem there, Laurie Smith. God bless you, and I hope things are looking up for you. Glad that you found a place. I want to say a prayer for you. Well, thank you, BDT. I appreciate that. Right back at you from Nicola myself. Hey, Dustin Smith, how you doing? Good to see you here. Vixen Doe there, another New Englander, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a solstice for those of you that celebrate the solstice in some way. And I had the yesterday's blog post was about the ghost stories at Christmas, the Victorian tradition, and today's post was about Yule traditions. And a lot of those are included in your Christmas, but they predate Christmas. So interesting reading of that. I love doing that blog. Probably going to start doing an audio version of that and attaching it to the Substack. You can have audio over there. Loving that community over there, though. Okay, let's have another story here. This one's about a haunted house story. It's called Number 90. And I'll be right back with you after this story. Enjoy, everyone. Merry Christmas.
For a period extending over some years, a notice appeared periodically in various daily newspapers. It read, "To let furnished, for a term of years, at a very low rental, a large old-fashioned family residence, comprising 11 bedrooms, 4 reception rooms, dressing rooms, 2 staircases, complete servants' offices, ample accommodation for a gentleman's establishment, including 6-stall stable, coach house, etc." This advertisement referred to Number 90. Occasionally saw it running for a week or a fortnight at a stretch, as if it were resolved to force itself into consideration by sheer persistency. Sometimes for months I looked for it in vain. Other folk might possibly fancy that the effort of the house agent had been crowned at last with success, that it was let and no longer in the market. I knew better. I knew that it would never find a tenant. I knew that it was passed on as a hopeless case from house agent to house agent. I knew that it would never be occupied save by rats, and, more than this, I knew the reason why. I will not say in what square, street, or road number 90 may be found, nor will I divulge to human beings its precise and exact locality, but this I am prepared to state, that it is positively in existence, it is in Charleston, and it is still empty. 20 years ago this very Christmas, I was down from New York visiting my friend John Hollyoak, a civil engineer from Charleston. We were guests at a little dinner party in the neighborhood of the South Battery. Conversation became very brisk as the champagne circulated, and many topics were started, discussed, and dismissed. We talked on an extraordinary variety of subjects. I distinctly recollect a long argument on mushrooms. Mushrooms, murders, racing, cholera. From cholera we came to sudden death, from sudden death to churchyards, and from churchyards it was naturally but a step to ghosts. John Hollyoak, who was the most vehement, the most incredulous, the most jocular, and the most derisive of the anti-ghost faction, brought matters to a climax by demanding that nothing would give him greater pleasure than to pass a night in a haunted house, and the worse its character, the better he would be pleased. His challenge was instantly taken up by our somewhat ruffled host, who warmly assured him that his wishes could be easily satisfied, and that he would be accommodated with a night's lodging in a haunted house within 24 hours. In fact, in a house of such desperate reputation that even the adjoining mansion stood vacant. He then proceeded to give a brief outline of the history of number 90. It had once been the residence of a well-known county family, but what evil events had happened therein, tradition did not relate. On the death of the last owner, a diabolical-looking aged person, much resembling the typical wizard, it had passed into the hands of a kinsman, resident abroad, who had no wish to return to Charleston, and who desired his agents to let it, if they could, a most significant condition. Year by year went, and still this highly desirable family mansion could find no tenant, although the rent was reduced, and again reduced to almost zero. The most ghastly whispers were afloat. The most terrible experiences were actually proclaimed on the housetops. No tenant would remain, even free, and for the last 10 years this handsome, desirable town family residence had been the abode of rats by day and something else by night, so said the neighbors. Of course, it was the very thing for John, and he snatched up the gauntlet on the spot. He scoffed at its evil repute and solemnly promised to rehabilitate its character within a week. I was charged by our host to serve as a witness to verify that John Hollyoak did indeed spend the night at number 90. The next night at 10 o'clock, I found myself standing with John on the steps of the notorious abode, but I was not going to remain. The carriage that brought us was to take me back to my respectable chambers. This ill-fated house was large, solemn-looking, and gloomy. A heavy portico frowned down on the neighboring bare-faced hall doors. The elderly caretaker was prudently waiting us outside with a key, which said key he turned in the lock and admitted us into a great echoing hall, black as night, saying as he did so, "My missus had made the bed and stoked up a good fire in the first front, sir. Your things is all laid out, and I hope you'll have a comfortable night, sir." No, sir. Thank you, sir. Excuse me. I'll not come in. Good night." And with the words still on his lips, he clattered down the steps with most indecent haste and vanished. "And of course you will not come in either," said John. "It is not in the bond, and I prefer to face them alone." And he laughed contemptuously, a laugh that had a curious echo, it struck me at the time. A laugh strangely repeated, with an unpleasant mocking emphasis. "Call for me, alive or dead, at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning," he added, pushing me forcibly out into the porch and closing the door with a heavy reverberating clang that sounded halfway down the street. I did call for him the next morning as desired, with the caretaker, who stared at John's commonplace, self-possessed appearance with an expression of respectful astonishment. "So it was all humbug, of course," I said, as he took my arm and we set off for our club. "You shall have the whole story whenever we have had something to eat," he replied somewhat impatiently. "It will keep till after breakfast. I'm famishing." I remarked that he did look unusually grave as we chatted over our broiled fish and omelet, and that occasionally his attention seemed wandering, to say the least. The moment he had brought out his cigar case and lit up, he turned to me and said, "I see you are just quivering to know my experience, and I won't keep you in suspense any longer. In 4 words, I have seen them." I merely looked at him with widely parted mouth and staring eyes. I believe I had best endeavor to give the narrative without comment. And in John Hollyoak's own way, this is, as well as I can recollect, his experience word for word. I proceeded upstairs after I'd shut you out, lighting my way by a match, and found the front door easily, as the door was ajar, and it was lit up by a roaring and most cheerful-looking fire and 2 wax candles. It was a comfortable apartment, furnished with old-fashioned chairs and tables, and the traditional 4-poster bed. There were numerous doors which proved to be cupboards, and when I had executed a rigorous search in each of these closets and locked them, and investigated the bed above and beneath, sounded the walls and bolted the door, I sat down before the fire, lit a cigar, opened a book, and felt that I was going to be master of the situation, and most thoroughly and comfortably at home. My novel proved absorbing. I read on greedily, chapter after chapter, and so interested was I and amused, for it was a lively book, that I positively lost sight of my whereabouts and fancied myself reading in my own chamber. There was not a sound. The coals dropping from the grate occasionally broke the silence, till a neighboring church clock slowly boomed 12. "The hour," I said to myself with a laugh, and as I gave the fire a rousing poke and commenced a new chapter, but ere I had read 3 pages I had occasion to pause and listen. What was that distinct sound now coming nearer and nearer? Rats, of course, said common sense. It was just the house for vermin. Then a longish silence. Again a stir, sounds approaching, as if apparently caused by many feet passing down the corridor. High-heeled shoes, the sweeping of silken trains. Of course it was all imagination, I assured myself, or rats. Rats were capable of making such curious, improbable noises. Then another silence. No sound but cinders and the ticking of my watch, which I had laid upon the table. I resumed my book, rather ashamed and a little indignant with myself for having neglected it, and calmly dismissed my late interruption as rats, nothing but rats. I had been reading and smoking for some time in a placid and highly incredulous frame of mind, when I was somewhat rudely startled by a loud single knock at my room door. I took no notice of it, but merely laid down my novel and sat tight. Another knock, more imperious this time. After a moment's mental deliberation, I arose, armed myself with the poker, prepared to brain any number of rats, and threw the door open with a violent swing that strained its very hinges, and beheld, to my amazement, a tall powdered footman in a laced scarlet uniform, who, making a formal inclination of his head, astonished me still further by saying, "Dinner is ready." "I'm not coming," I replied without a moment's hesitation, and thereupon I slammed the door in his face, locked it, and resumed my seat, and also my book. But reading was a farce. My ears were aching for the next sound. It came soon, rapid steps running up the stairs, and again a single knock. I went over to the door and once more discovered the tall butler, who repeated, with a studied courtesy, "Dinner is ready, and the company are awaiting." "I told you I was not coming. Be off and be hanged," I cried again, shutting the door violently. This time I did not make even a pretense at reading. I merely sat and waited for the next move. I had not long to sit. In 10 minutes I heard a third loud summons. I rose, went to the door, and tore it open. There, as I expected, was the servant again, with his parrot speech. "Dinner is ready, the company are waiting, and the master says you must come." "All right, then, I'll come," I replied, weird by reason of his importunity, and feeling suddenly fired with a desire to see the end of the adventure. He accordingly led the way downstairs, and I followed him, noting as I went the gold buttons on his coat, also that the hall and passages were now brilliantly illuminated by glowing candles, and hung with living green, the crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflecting back the light. There were several uniformed servants passing to and fro, and from the dining room there issued a buzz of tongues, loud volleys of laughter, many hilarious voices, and a clatter of knives and forks. I was not left much time for speculation, as in another second I found myself inside the door, and my escort announced me in a loud voice, "Mr. Hollyoake." I could hardly credit my senses as I looked round and saw about 24 people, dressed in the fashion of the 18th century, seated at the table, set for a sumptuous Christmas dinner, and lighted up by a blaze of wax candles in a massive candelabra. A swarthy elderly gentleman who presided at the head of the board rose deliberately as I entered. He was dressed in a crimson coat, braided with silver. He wore a white wig, had the most piercing black eyes I have ever encountered, made me the finest bow I'd ever received in all my life, and with a polite wave of his hand, indicated my seat, a vacant chair between two powdered and embroidered beauties, with overflowing white shoulders and necks sparkling with diamonds. At first I was fully convinced that the whole affair was a superbly matured practical joke. Everything looked so real, so truly flesh and blood, so complete in every detail. But I gazed around in vain for one familiar face. I saw young, old, and elderly, handsome in the reverse. On all faces there was a similar expression, reckless, hardened defiance, and something else that made me shudder, but that I could not classify or define. Were they a secret community? Burglars or counterfeiters? But no, in one rapid glance I noticed that they belonged exclusively to the upper stratum of society, bygone society. The jabber of talking had momentarily ceased, and the host, imperiously hammering the table with a knife handle, said in a singularly harsh, grating voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to give you a toast. Our guest," looking straight at me with his glittering coal-black eyes. Every glass was immediately raised. 20 faces were turned towards mine, when, happily, a sudden impulse seized me. I sprang to my feet and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to thank you for your kind hospitality, but before I accept it, allow me to say grace." I did not wait for permission, but hurriedly repeated a Latin benediction. Ere the last syllable was uttered, in an instant there was a violent crash, an uproar, a sound of running, of screams, groans, and curses, and then utter darkness. I found myself standing alone by a big mahogany table, which I could just dimly discern by the aid of a street lamp that threw its meager rays into the great empty dining room from two deep and narrow windows. I must confess that I felt my nerves a little shaken by this instantaneous change from light to darkness, from a crowd of gay and noisy companions to utter solitude and silence. I stood for a moment trying to recover my mental balance. I rubbed my eyes hard to assure myself that I was wide awake, and then I placed the very cigar case in the middle of the table as a sign and token that I had been downstairs, which cigar case I found exactly where I left it this morning, and then went and groped my way into the hall and regained my room. I met with no obstacle en route. I saw no one, but as I closed and double-locked my door, I distinctly heard a low laugh outside the keyhole, a sort of suppressed malicious titter that made me furious. I opened the door at once. There was nothing to be seen. I waited and listened. Dead silence. I then undressed and went to bed, resolved that a whole army of butlers would fail to lure me once more to that Christmas feast. I was determined not to lose my night's rest, ghosts or no ghosts. Just as I was dozing off, I remember hearing the neighboring clock chime 2. It was the last sound I was aware of. The house was now as silent as a vault. My fire burned away cheerfully. I was no longer in the least degree inclined for reading, and I fell fast asleep and slept soundly till I heard the cabs and milk carts beginning their morning career. I then rose, dressed at my leisure, and found you, my good, faithful friend, awaiting me, rather anxiously, on the hall door steps. I have not done with that house yet. I'm determined to find out who these people are and where they come from. I shall sleep there again tonight, along with my bulldog, and you will see that I shall have news for you tomorrow morning, if I am still alive to tell the tale," he added with a laugh. In vain I would have dissuaded him. I protested, argued, and implored. I declared that rashness was not courage, that he had seen enough, that I, who had seen nothing and only listened to his experience, was convinced that number 90 was a house to be avoided. I might just as well have talked to my umbrella. So, once more, I reluctantly accompanied him to his previous night's lodging. Once more I saw him swallowed up inside the gloomy, forbidding-looking, re-echoing hall. I then went home in an unusually anxious, semi-excited, nervous state of mind. I lay wide awake, tumbling and tossing hour after hour, a prey to the most foolish ideas I'd have laughed to scorn in daylight. More than once I was certain that I had heard John Hollyoake distractedly calling me, and I sat up in bed and listened intently. Of course it was fancy, for the instant I did so, there was no sound. At the first gleam of winter dawn, I rose, dressed, and swallowed a cup of good strong coffee to clear my brain from the misty notions it had harbored during the night. And then I invested myself in my warmest top coat and set off for number 90. Early as it was but 7:30, I found the caretaker was before me, pacing the pavement, his face drawn with a melancholy expression. I was not disposed to wait for 8 o'clock. I was too uneasy and too impatient for further particulars of the Christmas dinner party, so I rang with all my might and knocked with all my strength. No sound within, no answer. But John always was a heavy sleeper. I was resolved to rouse him all the same, and knocked and rang and knocked incessantly for fully 10 minutes. I then stooped down and applied my eye to the keyhole. I looked steadily into that aperture till I became accustomed to the darkness, and then it seemed to me that another eye, a very strange, fiery eye, was glaring into mine from the other side of the door. I removed my eye and applied my mouth instead, and shouted with all the power of my lungs, "John! John Hollyoake!" How his name echoed and re-echoed up through that dark and empty house. He must hear that, I said to myself as I pressed my ear closely against the lock and listened with throbbing suspense. The echo of Hollyoake had hardly died away when I swear I distinctly heard a low, snickering, mocking laugh. That was my only answer. That and a vast unresponsive silence. I was now quite desperate. I shook the door frantically with all my strength. I broke the bell. In short, my behavior was such that it excited the curiosity of a police officer who crossed the road to know what was up. "I want to get in," I panted, breathless with my exertions. "You'd better stay where you are," said the police officers. "The outside of this house is the best of it. They're terrible stories. But there's a gentleman inside it, I interrupted impatiently. He slept there last night, and I can't wake him. He has the key. Oh, you can't wake him, returned the police officer gravely. Then we must get a locksmith. But already the thoughtful caretaker had procured one, and already a considerable and curious crowd surrounded the steps. After 5 minutes of maddening delay, the great heavy door was opened and swung slowly back, and I instantly rushed in, followed less frantically by the police officer and the caretaker. I had not far to seek John Hollyoake. He and his dog were lying at the foot of the stairs, both stone dead.
And a Merry Christmas Eve to everybody here. Thank you for being here with us. Hope you enjoyed that story. That one was really scary. It's written by Mrs. B.M. Croker, late Victorian era. Don't know the exact year, but it was a good story nonetheless. Number 90. Who else have we got here? If anybody new's come in. And I want to thank those of you that donated. Jangles, thank you. And Dustin Smith, thank you for the super stickers and the super chats. And Jangles, I pray that you have a wonderfully Merry Christmas as well from both Nicole and myself. Lee talking about pouring Iron Brew down the sink. What a travesty. Iron Brew is a wonderful drink. Glorianne K, how you doing? Merry Christmas from Saskatchewan, working the night shift. Hope you have an easy shift and a happy Christmas. Hope you're off tomorrow. But some of those positions, I've done that. I've worked holidays before. I usually did it so somebody that had a family could take time off to be with their loved ones. I didn't mind pulling a Christmas Eve or even a Christmas Day shift in the past. Let's see. Gurfy, how you doing, sir? Good to see you here with us. And yes, it is indeed Christmas in the UK now. It's after midnight, about 1:15. See if I missed anybody here. I think I'm caught up on the chat again. Thanks for everybody that's watching and listening tonight. Andrew Gnome Trucking, how you doing, sir? Now, are you home tonight or are you on the road somewhere, Andrew? You stay safe out there on the road. Hey, Cat B. Better late than never, but Merry Christmas to you and yours. Scott's Life, thank you for the gifting the memberships there. Greatly appreciated. Let's see who got it. Thor's 08 got one. Marilyn Hendricks. Dara. Chris with a K. Blind Neil, also recipient of those memberships gifted by Scott's Life. Thank you very much, Scott. We certainly appreciate that. Retrospective Vault, how you doing, AJK? Good to see you, my man. Austin Acidy. Glad to see you back. Paula Tripodi, member of the channel. How you doing? Good to see you. Thanks to all my members for being here. And this cold and rainy night in New England. I said not the Courier knives that I expected, but I'll take it. I'm just happy to be in New England. I got a couple more stories for you coming up. Another ghost story. Oh, gosh, Margaret Johnson, I just published my 19th book, 20, if you count the one that I did with Cisco Murdoch. That one was We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. It's really Cisco's book. I just, she did the heavy lifting. I just did the... Hey, Dustin Smith, thanks for being a channel member. But that one, and then these five are with the same publisher. Got Strange Things in the Woods. Now, this wasn't 2 volumes, but when I went with a traditional publisher, they combined it into one. So sometimes on Amazon, it still shows as book 1 of 2, right now it's just one book. It's been combined into two, although I'm working on a second and third volume of this one. And My Strange World, which is autobiographical, a few of my personal paranormal experiences. Some of these you heard me talk about over on the Belief Hole podcast. And don't forget, those guys are going to be on my radio show, Everything Out There, on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network in January. They're coming over. And the others, National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1, 2, and 3. There's more volumes of this in the works. Volume 1 is the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, area near and dear to my heart. It's where I grew up, just outside the Smokies. Spent a lot of time hiking and camping up there. And again, these aren't just disappearances. Those are in there. But there's ghost stories. There's, in this one, there's Cherokee legends. And hey, thank you, Ann Joanne, for the super sticker. I appreciate that. A little bit of everything in here, something for everyone. And then Volume 2 of that is a part of California. Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. And my favorite chapter in here is the one about Graham Parsons in Joshua Tree. I spent some time, I've been there many times, to the Joshua Tree Inn, where Graham sadly passed away. But I had an unusual experience there. I think you'll love reading about it. I mentioned it briefly in the Joshua Tree video that we did on this channel here. And the third one, Volume 3, Pacific Northwest, including Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Again, disappearances, but also mysteries, strange things, ghost stories, a little bit of everything. And that was with a different publisher. Then over on Free Reign, at freerainbooks.com, I've got several new volumes over there. It would be hard to... I've got the Legends and Stories series. There's 3 volumes of that. The Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail, the first 3 in that set. And I've got, I can't think of the name of it right now. That's horrible when you can't think of the name of your own books. But I've got several volumes of that over there. Then I've got the 13 Past Midnight series started over there too. That's Free Reign Books. I've got to go look and see. I just, in my dotage here, that was a book series with just I don't want to say the wrong thing. Let me look here real quick. It's similar to somebody's channel name, and I don't want to say the wrong thing and offend somebody. Mysteries in the Dark. I don't know why I couldn't think of that, but it's over on freerainbooks.com. You can get signed copies. I've got Mysteries in the Dark, volumes 1 through 9, and then I've got 13 Past Midnight, volumes 1, 2, and 3, with the rest of those coming soon. And then the Legends and Stories series. But working on more, even as we speak. Nicole and I are doing one together. Actually, we're working on 2 or 3. Also working on a fictional novel. Now, I've written some fiction in the past, some short stories and things. This is the first time I'm tackling a novel, so I'm really excited about it. Probably going to serialize that over on Substack. And another nod to Dickens there. He used to publish his books in installments. So, yeah, there's lots of books, a lot more books in me to come. And don't forget, I've got a lot of things going on. Don't forget, Lee G, First Floor Audio, and I, starting in January, we're going to have From Beyond, which is a YouTube channel that covers paranormal, supernatural, anything strange, anything from beyond. And it's he and I are the co-hosts together, and we have a guest come on and we interview them. Nicole's producing, and then she also has Insomniac Radio Theater. If you like to hear me reading fiction, kind of like I'm doing here tonight, go over there and have a listen to that. And I might even play some of that tonight here on the way out. But going to go ahead and have another Victorian ghost story for you here in the spirit and tradition of a ghost story at Christmas. This one is called The Doll's Ghost, and I'll be back with you right after this plays. Merry Christmas, everybody. Stick around. Hey, Sarah Claire. How you doing? All the way from down under. Good to see you. And there's a little something for you, Sarah Claire. She's our newest moderator. Thank you, Sarah Claire. All right, gonna play The Doll's Ghost for you here, and then I'll be back and talk some more with you. Thanks for being here. Merry Christmas to the people where it's already Christmas in the UK. I think it's been Christmas down under there for a while. Sarah Claire and some of our other friends from the Southern Hemisphere. But again, thanks everybody for being here. I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Enjoy this spooky ghost story for Christmas.
It was a terrible accident, and for one moment the splendid machinery of Cranston House got out of gear and stood still. The butler emerged from the retirement in which he spent his elegant leisure. Two grooms of the chambers appeared simultaneously from opposite directions. There were actually housemaids on the grand staircase, and those who remember the facts most exactly assert that Miss Pringle herself positively stood upon the landing. Miss Pringle was the housekeeper. As for the head nurse, the under nurse, and the nursery maid, their feelings cannot be described. The head nurse laid one hand upon the polished marble balustrade and stared stupidly before her. The under nurse stood rigid and pale, leaning against the polished marble wall, and the nursery maid collapsed and sat down upon the polished marble step just beyond the limits of the velvet carpet, and frankly burst into tears. The Lady Gwendolen Lancaster Douglas Scroop, youngest daughter of the 9th Duke of Cranston and aged 6 years and 3 months, picked herself up quite alone and sat down on the third step from the foot of the grand staircase in Cranston House. "Oh," exclaimed the butler, and he disappeared again. "Ah," responded the grooms of the chambers, as they also went away. "It's only that doll," Miss Pringle was distinctly heard to say in a tone of contempt. The under-nurse heard her say it. Then the three nurses gathered round Lady Gwendolen, patted her, and gave her unhealthy things out of their pocket, and hurried her out of Cranston House as fast as they could, lest it should be found out upstairs that they had allowed the Lady Gwendolen Lancaster Douglas Scroop to tumble down the grand staircase with her doll in her arms. And as the doll was badly broken, the nursery maid carried it, with the pieces, wrapped up in Lady Gwendolen's little cloak. It was not far to Hyde Park, and when they had reached a quiet place, they took means to find out that Lady Gwendolen had no bruises. The carpet was very thick and soft, and there was soft stuff under it to make it softer. Lady Gwendolen Douglas Scroop sometimes yelled, but she never cried. It was because she had yelled that the nurses had allowed her to go downstairs alone with Nina, the doll, under one arm, while she steadied herself with the other hand on the balustrade and trod upon the polished marble steps beyond the edge of the carpet. So she had fallen, and Nina, the doll, had come to grief. When the nurses were quite sure that she was not hurt, they unwrapped the doll and looked at her in her turn. She had a very beautiful doll, very large and fair and healthy, with real yellow hair and eyelids that would open and shut over very grown-up dark eyes. Moreover, when you moved her right arm up and down, she said, "Papa," and when you moved the left, she said, "Mama," very distinctly. "I heard her say Pa when she fell," said the under-nurse, who heard everything, "but she ought to have said Papa." "That's because her arm went up when she hit the step," said the head nurse. "She'll say the other Pa when I put it down again." "Pa," said Nina, as her right arm was pushed down and speaking through her broken face. It was scratched right across from the upper corner of the forehead with a hideous gash, through the nose and down to the little frilled collar of the pale green silk Mother Hubbard frock, and 2 little 3-cornered pieces of porcelain had fallen out. "I'm sure it's a wonder she can speak at all, being all smashed," said the under-nurse. "You'll have to take her to Mr. Puckler," said her superior. "It's not far, and you'd better go at once." Lady Gwendolen was occupied in digging a hole in the ground with a little spade, and paid no attention to the nurses. "What are you doing?" inquired the nursery maid, looking on. "Nina's dead, and I'm digging her a grave," replied her ladyship thoughtfully. "Oh, she'll come to life again all right," said the nursery maid. The undernurse wrapped Nina up again and departed. Fortunately, a kind soldier, with very long legs and a very small cap, happened to be there, and as he had nothing to do, he offered to see the undernurse safely to Mr. Puckler's and back. Mr. Bernard Puckler and his little daughter lived in a little house in a little alley which led out of a quiet little street not very far from Belgrave Square. He was the great doll doctor, and his extensive practice lay in the most aristocratic quarter. He mended dolls of all sizes and ages, boy dolls and girl dolls, baby dolls in long clothes, and grown-up dolls in fashionable gowns, talking dolls and dumb dolls, those that shut their eyes when they lay down, and those whose eyes had to be shut for them by means of a mysterious wire. His daughter Elsie was only just over 12 years old, but she was already very clever at mending dolls' clothes and at doing their hair, which is harder than you might think, though the dolls sit quite still while it is being done. Mr. Puckler had originally been a German, but he had dissolved his nationality in the ocean of London many years ago, like a great many foreigners. He still had one or two German friends, however, who came on Saturday evenings and smoked with him and played piquet or scat with him for farthing points and called him Herr Doctor, which seemed to please Mr. Puckler very much. He looked older than he was, for his beard was rather long and ragged, his hair was grizzled and thin, and he wore horn-rimmed spectacles. As for Elsie, she was a thin, pale child, very quiet and neat, with dark eyes and brown hair that was plaited down their back and tied with a bit of black ribbon. She mended the dolls' clothes and took the dolls back to their homes when they were quite strong again. The house was a little one, but too big for the two people who lived in it. There was a small sitting room on the street, and the workshop was at the back, and there were 3 rooms upstairs. But the father and daughter lived most of their time in the workshop, because they were generally at work, even in the evenings. Mr. Puckler laid Nina on the table and looked at her a long time, till the tears began to fill his eyes behind the horn-rimmed spectacles. He was a very susceptible man, and he often fell in love with the dolls he mended, and found it hard to part with them when they had smiled at him for a few days. They were real little people to him, with characters and thoughts and feelings of their own, and he was very tender with them all. But some attracted him especially from the first, and when they were brought to him maimed and injured, their state seemed so pitiful to him that the tears came easily. You must remember that he lived among dolls during a great part of his life and understood them. "How do you know that they feel nothing?" he went on to say to Elsie. "You must be gentle with them. It costs nothing to be kind to little beings, and perhaps it makes a difference to them." And Elsie understood him because she was a child, and she knew that she was more to him than all the dolls. He fell in love with Nina at first sight, perhaps because her beautiful brown glass eyes were something like Elsie's own, and he loved Elsie first and best with all his heart. And besides, it was a very sorrowful case. Nina had evidently not been long in the world, for her complexion was perfect, her hair was smooth where it should be smooth and curly where it should be curly, and her silk clothes were perfectly new. But across her face was that frightful gash like a saber cut, deep and shadowy within, but clean and sharp at the edges. When he tenderly pressed her head to close the gaping wound, the edges made a fine grating sound that was painful to hear, and the lids of the dark eyes quivered and trembled as though Nina were suffering dreadfully. "Poor Nina," he exclaimed sorrowfully, "but I shall not hurt you much, though you will take a long time to get strong." He always asked the names of the broken dolls when they were brought to him, and sometimes the people knew what the children called them and told him. He liked Nina for a name. Altogether and in every way she pleased him more than any doll he had seen for many years, and he felt drawn to her and made up his mind to make her perfectly strong and sound, no matter how much labor it might cost him. Mr. Puckler worked patiently a little at a time, and Elsie watched him. She could do nothing for poor Nina, whose clothes needed no mending. The longer the doll doctor worked, the more fond he became of the yellow hair and the beautiful brown glass eyes. He sometimes forgot all the other dolls that were waiting to be mended, lying side by side on a shelf, and sat for an hour gazing at Nina's face while he racked his ingenuity for some new invention by which to hide even the smallest trace of the terrible accident. She was wonderfully mended, even he was obliged to admit that. But the scar was still visible to his keen eyes, a very fine line right across the face, downwards from right to left. Yet all the conditions had been most favorable for a cure, since the cement had set quite hard at the first attempt and the weather had been fine and dry, which makes a great difference in a doll's hospital. At last he knew that he could do no more, and the under-nurse had already come twice to see whether the job was finished, as she coarsely expressed it. "Nina's not quite strong yet," Mr. Puckler had answered each time, for he could not make up his mind to face the parting.
And now he sat before the square deal table at which he worked, and Nina lay before him for the last time, with a big brown paper box beside her. It stood there like her coffin, waiting for her, he thought. He must put her into it and lay tissue paper over her dear face, and then put on the lid. And at the thought of tying the string, his sight was dim with tears again. He was never to look into the glassy depths of the beautiful brown eyes any more, nor to hear the little wooden voice say, "Papa" and "Mama." It was a very painful moment. In the vain hope of gaining time before the separation, he took up the little sticky bottles of cement and glue and gum and color, looking at each one in turn, and then at Nina's face. And all his small tools lay there, neatly arranged in a row, but he knew that he could not use them again for Nina. She was quite strong at last, and in a country where there should be no cruel children to hurt her, she might live 100 years, with only that almost imperceptible line across her face, to tell the fearful thing that had befallen her on the marble steps of Cranston House. Suddenly, Mr. Puckler's heart was quite full, and he rose abruptly from his seat and turned away. "Elsie," he said unsteadily, "you must do it for me. I cannot bear to see her go into the box." So he went and stood at the window with his back turned while Elsie did what he had not the heart to do. "Is it done?" he asked, not turning round. "Then take her away, my dear. Put on your hat and take her to Cranston House quickly, and when you are gone I will turn around." Elsie was used to her father's strange ways with the dolls, and, though she had never seen him so much moved by parting, she was not much surprised. "Come back quickly," he said, when he heard her hand on the latch. "It is growing late, and I should not send you at this hour, but I cannot bear to look forward to it any more." When Elsie was gone, he left the window and sat down in his place before the table again to wait for the child to come back. He touched the place where Nina had lain, very gently, and he recalled the softly tinted pink face, and the glass eyes, and the ringlets of yellow hair, till he could almost see them. The evenings were long, for it was late in the spring, but it began to grow dark soon, and Mr. Puckler wondered why Elsie did not come back. She had been gone an hour and a half, and that was much longer than he had expected, for it was barely half a mile from Belgrave Square to Cranston House. He reflected that the child might have been kept waiting, but as the twilight deepened he grew anxious and walked up and down in the dim workshop, no longer thinking of Nina, but of Elsie, his own living child, whom he loved. An undefinable, disquieting sensation came upon him by fine degrees, a chilliness and a faint stirring of his thin hair, joined with a wish to be in any company rather than to be alone much longer. It was the beginning of fear. He told himself in strong German English that he was a foolish old man, and he began to feel about for the matches in the dusk. He knew just where they should be, for he always kept them in the same place, close to the little tin box that held bits of sealing wax of various colors for some kinds of mending. But somehow he could not find the matches in the gloom. Something had happened to Elsie, he was sure, and as his fear increased, he felt as though it might be allayed if he could get a light and see what time it was. Then he called himself a foolish old man again, and the sound of his own voice startled him in the dark. He could not find the matches. The window was gray still. He might see what time it was if he went close to it, and he could go out and get matches out of the cupboard afterwards. He stood back from the table to get out of the way of the chair and began to cross the board floor. Something was following him in the dark. There was a small pattering, as of tiny feet upon the boards. He stopped and listened, and the roots of his hair tingled. It was nothing, and he was a foolish old man. He made 2 steps more, and he was sure that he heard the little pattering again. He turned his back to the window, leaning against the sash so that the panes began to crack, and he faced the dark. Everything was quite still, and it smelled of paste and cement and wood filings as usual. "Is that you, Elsie?" he asked, and he was surprised with the fear in his own voice. There was no answer in the room, and he held up his watch and tried to make out what time it was by the gray dusk that was just not darkness. So far as he could see, it was within 2 or 3 minutes of 10 o'clock. He had been a long time alone. He was shocked and frightened for Elsie, out in London so late, and he almost ran across the room to the door. "Mice!" he exclaimed feebly, just as he got the door open. He shut it quickly behind him and felt as though some cold thing had settled on his back and were writhing upon him. The passage was quite dark, but he found his hat and was out in the alley in a moment, breathing more freely, and surprised to find how much light there still was in the open air. He could see the pavement clearly under his feet, and far off in the street to which the alley led, he could hear the laughter and calls of children playing some game out of doors. He wondered how he could have been so nervous, and for an instant he thought of going back into the house to wait quietly for Elsie. But instantly he felt that nervous fright of something stealing over him again. In any case, it was better to walk up to Cranston House and ask the servants about the child. One of the women had perhaps taken a fancy to her,
and was even now giving her tea and cake. He walked quickly to Belgrave Square, then up the broad streets, listening as he went, whenever there was no other sound but the tiny footsteps. But he heard nothing, and was laughing at himself when he rang the servant's bell at the big house. Of course, the child must be there. The person who opened the door was quite an inferior person, for it was a back door, but affected the manners of the front, and stared at Mr. Puckler strangely under the strong light. No little girl had been seen, and he knew nothing about no dolls. "She is my little girl," said Mr. Puckler tremulously, for all his anxiety was returning tenfold, "and I'm afraid something has happened." The inferior person said rudely that nothing could have happened to her in that house because she had not been there, which was a jolly good reason why. Mr. Puckler was obliged to admit that the man ought to know, as it was his business to keep the door and let people in. He wished to be allowed to speak to the under-nurse, who knew him, but the man was ruder than ever, and finally shut the door in his face. When the doll doctor was alone in the street, he steadied himself by the railing, for he felt as though he were breaking in two, just as some dolls break, in the middle of the backbone. Presently, he knew that he must be doing something to find Elsie, and that gave him strength. He began to walk as quickly as he could through the streets, following every highway and byway which his little girl might have taken on her errand. He also asked several policemen in vain if they had seen her, and most of them answered kindly, for they saw that he was a sober man and in his right senses, and some of them had little girls of their own. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when he went up to his own door again, worn out and hopeless and broken-hearted. As he turned the key in the lock, his heart stood still, for he knew that he was awake and not dreaming, and that he really heard those tiny footsteps pattering to meet him inside the house along the passage. But he was too unhappy to be much frightened any more, and his heart went on again with a dull, regular pain that ground its way all through him with every pulse. So he went in and hung up his hat in the dark, and found the matches in the cupboard and the candlestick in its place in the corner. Mr. Puckler was so overcome and so completely worn out that he sat down in his chair before the work table and almost fainted, as his face dropped forward upon his folded hands. Beside him, the solitary candle burned steadily, with a low flame in the still, warm air. "Elsie, Elsie," he moaned against his yellow knuckles, and that was all he could say, and it was no relief to him. On the contrary, the very sound of that name was a new and sharp pain that pierced his ears and his head and his very soul. For every time he repeated the name, it meant that little Elsie was dead, somewhere out in the streets of London in the dark. He was so terribly hurt that he did not even feel something pulling gently at the skirt of his old coat, so gently that it was like the nibbling of a tiny mouse. He might have thought it really was a mouse if he had noticed it. "Elsie, Elsie," he groaned, right against his hands. Then a cool breath stirred his thin hair, and the low flame of the one candle dropped down almost to a mere spark, not flickering as though a draft were going to blow it out, but just dropping down as if it were tired out. Mr. Puckler felt his hands stiffening with fright under his face, and there was a faint rustling sound, like some small silk thing blown in a gentle breeze. He sat up straight, stark and scared, and a small wooden voice spoke in the stillness. "Papa," it said, with a break between the syllables. Mr. Puckler stood up in a single jump, and his chair fell over backwards with a smashing noise upon the wooden floor. The candle had almost gone out. It was Nina's doll's voice that had spoken, and he should have known it among the voices of 100 other dolls. And yet there was something more in it, a little human ring, with a pitiful cry and a call for help, and the wail of a hurt child. Mr. Puckler stood up, stark and stiff, and tried to look round, but at first he could not, for he seemed to be frozen from head to foot. Then he made a great effort, and he raised one hand to each of his temples and pressed his own head round as he would have turned it tall's. The candle was burning so low that it might as well have been out altogether, for any light it gave, and the room seemed quite dark at first. Then he saw something. He would not have believed that he could be more frightened than he had been just before that. But he was, and his knees shook, for he saw the doll standing in the middle of the floor, shining with a faint and ghostly radiance, her beautiful glassy brown eyes fixed on his, and across her face the very thin line of the break he had mended shone as though it were drawn in light with a fine point of white flame. Yet there was something more in the eyes, too. There was something human, like Elsie's own, but as if only the doll saw him through them, and not Elsie. And there was enough of Elsie to bring back all his pain and to make him forget his fear. "Elsie, my little Elsie," he cried aloud. The small ghost moved, and its doll arm slowly rose and fell with a stiff, mechanical motion. "Papa," it said. It seemed this time that there was even more of Elsie's tone echoing somewhere between the wooden notes that reached his ears so distinctly, and yet so far away. Elsie was calling him, he was sure. His face was perfectly white in the gloom, but his knees did not shake any more, and he felt that he was less frightened. "Yes, child, but where? Where?" he asked. "Where are you, Elsie?" Papa. The syllables died away in the quiet room. There was a low rustling of silk, the glassy brown eyes turned slowly away, and Mr. Puckler heard the pitter-patter of the small feet in the bronze kid slippers as the figure ran straight to the door. Then the candle burned high again, the room was full of light, and he was alone. Mr. Puckler passed his hand over his eyes and looked about him. He could see everything quite clearly, and he felt that he must have been dreaming, though he was standing instead of sitting down, as he should have been, as if he had just woken up. The candle burned brightly now. There were the dolls to be mended, lying in a row with their toes up. The third one had lost her right shoe, and Elsie was making one. He knew that, and he was certainly not dreaming now. He had not been dreaming when he had come in from his fruitless search, and had heard the doll's footsteps running to the door. He had not fallen asleep in his chair. How could he possibly have fallen asleep when his heart was breaking? He had been awake all the time. He steadied himself, sat the fallen chair upon its legs, and said to himself again very emphatically that he was a foolish old man. He ought to be out in the streets looking for his child, asking questions and inquiring at the police stations where all accidents were reported as soon as they were known, or at the hospitals. Papa! The longing, wailing, pitiful little wooden cry rang from the passage outside the door, and Mr. Puckler stood for an instant with white face, transfixed and rooted to the spot. A moment later his hand was on the latch. Then he was in the passage, with the light streaming from the open door behind him. Quite at the other end he saw the little phantom shining clearly in the shadow, and the right hand seemed to beckon him as the arm rose and fell once more. He knew all at once that it had not come to frighten him, but to lead him. And when it disappeared and he walked boldly towards the door, he knew that it was in the street outside, waiting for him. He forgot that he was tired and had eaten no supper and had walked many miles, for a sudden hope ran through and through him like a golden stream of life. And sure enough, at the corner of the alley, and at the corner of the street, and out in Belgrave Square, he saw the small ghost flitting before him. Sometimes it was only a shadow where there was other light, but then the glare of the lamps made a pale green sheen on its little Mother Hubbard frock of silk. And sometimes, where the streets were dark and silent, the whole figure shone out brightly, with its yellow curls and rosy neck. It seemed to trot along like a tiny child, and Mr. Puckler could almost hear the pattering of the bronze kid slippers on the pavement as it ran. But it went very fast, and he could only just keep up with it, tearing along with his hat on the back of his head and his thin hair blown by the night breeze, and his horn-rimmed spectacles firmly set upon his broad nose. On and on he went, and he had no idea where he was. He did not even care, for he was certain that he was going the right way. Then at last, in a wide, quiet street, he was standing before a big, sober-looking door that had 2 lamps on each side of it and a polished brass bell handle, which he pulled. And just inside, when the door was opened, in the bright light, there was the little shadow and the pale green sheen of the little silk dress, and once more the small cry came to his ears, less pitiful, more longing. Papa! The shadow turned suddenly bright, and out of the brightness the beautiful brown glass eyes were turned up happily to his, while the rosy mouth smiled so divinely that the phantom doll looked almost like a little angel just then. A little girl was brought in soon after 10 o'clock, said the quiet voice of the hospital doorkeeper. I think they thought she was only stunned. She was holding a big brown paper box against her, and they could not get it out of her arms. She had a long plait of brown hair that hung down as they carried her. She is my little girl, said Mr. Puckler, but he hardly heard his own voice. He leaned over Elsie's face in the gentle light of the children's ward, and when he had stood there a minute, the beautiful brown eyes opened and looked up to his. Papa, cried Elsie softly, I knew you would come. Then Mr. Puckler did not know what he did or said for a moment, and what he felt was worth all the fear and terror and despair that had almost killed him that night. But by and by Elsie was telling her story, and the nurse let her speak, for there were only 2 other children in the room. They were big boys with bad faces, said Elsie, and they tried to get Nina away from me. But I held on and fought as well as I could till one of them hit me with something, and I don't remember anymore, for I tumbled down, and I suppose the boys ran away and somebody found me there, but I'm afraid Nina is all smashed. Here's the box, said the nurse. We could not take it out of her arms till she came to herself. Should you like to see if the doll is broken? And she undid the string cleverly, but Nina was all smashed to pieces. Only the gentle light of the children's ward made a pale green sheen in the folds of the little Mother Hubbard frock.
Hey, everybody, Merry Christmas Eve or Merry Christmas to you. If it's Christmas wherever you are, I know some of our friends in Australia, so it's like afternoon on Christmas Day down there. And it's just after midnight in the UK, a few minutes past now. Well, 47 minutes past, but Merry Christmas to our friends across the pond and down under. Margaret Johnson, I'm glad you're enjoying this. This is my best Christmas Eve ever, too. Happy to be here in New England with my beautiful bride. It just doesn't get any better. Thanks, everybody, for coming in. Charinator, thank you for joining the channel, my friend. You and Dustin are the newest channel members there. And thanks again for the donations. Andrew and Gnomes Trucking, thank you so much. And Jamie, good to see you, my friend. I hope your mother's doing well. Jamie and her mother drove all the way from Seattle to a book signing that I was doing in Yakima, Washington. I guess it's been a couple of years ago now. And then we all went out for dinner afterwards. I hope your husband's doing well too, Jamie. And Tara, Merry Christmas to you and baby Iris. I bet she's grown. Let's see, anybody else sneak in here that I haven't been able to say hi to? Yeah, that was a good one. Very, very creepy. Again, a creepy Christmas story in the Victorian tradition. Let's see, I'm going to do the live reading of The Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. But if you want, a lot of you have been asking about Midnight Mailbox and where you can send your stories in for that. Some of them are ghost stories. It's Christmas Eve. You want me to play that video as well for the Midnight Mailbox, the first episode of that? I'll do that. And then come back and give you the live reading of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which I do every year. And let me see if I can get him on camera. I have a special guest here. Well, hang on a minute here. He's a little camera shy, but he's wearing one of his Christmas gifts. Let me get him up here. Hang on, he's got one leg in, one leg out. Hang on, buddy. Let's fix your leg there. I didn't get you on camera. Oh, and he's suddenly gone all wiggly. There we go. There we go. You look styling in your new outfit there. Oh, we got your foot caught. Hang on a minute. And Mr. Mulder wants to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Yeah, a Merry Christmas. Kind of a Merry Christmas. There he is. Wave hi, Mulder. Mulder sends his love and Christmas greetings. And he's got on his one of his Christmas presents here. Can anybody tell me what movie this quote is from? See if I can get him up here on camera. It says, it's you can't see it very well, but it says, "Merry Christmas, you filthy animal." Does anybody know what movie that's from? But this is Mr. Mulder for those of you that haven't met him before. He's a Chihuahua Corgi mix, rescue dog. Got him in Portland, Oregon when I lived there at a no-kill shelter called the Pixie Project. And yeah, it's from Home Alone, indeed. But tell everybody good night and Merry Christmas, Mr. Mulder, and I'll put you back down. He's kind of camera shy. There we are. Good boy. Thank you. Oh, now I caught. There we go. Managed to get him wrapped up in the headphone cord. But yeah, that's in Home Alone. No, he's not mean at all. He's getting older now. They thought he was about a year old when I got him, and I've had him as 8 years, I think, in June. So, he's at least going to be 9 years old anyway. We celebrate our birthday on Halloween together because I'm not really sure when his birthday is, but he's a good little dog. Getting older, sleeps a lot. Now, Mulder, that name, that does come from the X-Files, Fox Mulder. When I brought him home, the shelter had named him Croissant, and I think he was embarrassed by that name. So I thought, I'm not going to call him Croissant. I'm going to name him something else. And he was sitting out in the backyard in some bamboo I had out there, and he was peeking out at me. And he had his little ears standing straight up. And his coloring, at that time, he's got a lot of gray, me and him both. But he looked like a little fox sitting out there. And I thought, Fox, Mulder. He became Mulder. I've always been a big X-Files fan. So that's how his name came about. But the shirt, that's a quote from Home Alone. Yeah, let's go, Brandon. I've got, Nicole had never seen the X-Files. I've got her started on it. She loves it so far. But today we watched A Christmas Story. The Ralphie and Randy and the leg lamp and all that. You'll shoot your eye out. Love that movie. We've watched that several times. Got all the classics. Got the animated stuff, the Grinch and Charlie Brown Christmas and Rudolph. And got several other Christmas movies, some other Bad Santa, and we've been going to town on our Christmas movie binge here. We've had a great Christmas Eve. Nicole had a little bit of a headache, and she's laying down taking a rest, but she sends her love and Christmas greetings to all of you. So did you want me to play the Midnight Mailbox episode and then come back and we'll close it out with 'Twas the Night Before Christmas? But now the Midnight Mailbox is open. Midnight Mailbox 13 at gmail.com. Send in your personal paranormal experiences. It can be, doesn't have to happen to you, but like a family member or a friend or something. I prefer it to be your story, just as long as it's true. Send those in, and I'll narrate them in a future episode. And let me go ahead and play this first one here. I'm already working on the second episode. If you just want to hear the audio, you can hear that over on Spreaker. Link over there. The same with Among the Missing. All the audio from the channel is up there if you just want to listen to it and download it whenever you want. Yep, Christmas Vacation, got that one here too. And I'm going to go ahead and play listener story submissions to the Midnight Mailbox, and I'll be back with you right after this. Thanks again for being here, buddy. Thanks for all your charity. I feel so blessed. Love each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. Have a Merry Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas, if it's already Christmas wherever you are. And I think I saw Callie Snyder in here earlier. He's got a while to go. He's in Hawaii. But, yeah, send in those stories if you have something like this. Hat Man, shadow people, ghosts, any unusual, any weird encounters that you've had. I'd love to read your story and record it and put it out there. So, here you go. I'll see you right after this. Merry Christmas, everybody. Welcome, dear listeners, to Midnight Mailbox, the podcast that unlocks the eerie secrets hidden in the shadows of the night. I'm your host, Steve Stockton, and tonight we embark on a journey into the supernatural, guided by the tales that arrive in our mysterious mailbox. Each episode, we delve into the unexplained, the otherworldly, and the downright spine-chilling experiences shared by you, our brave listeners. Picture this. It's the dead of night, and you find yourself alone, surrounded by an atmosphere thick with mystery. That's when the unexplainable happens. Maybe it's a ghostly encounter, an extraterrestrial rendezvous, or a brush with the unknown that sends shivers down your spine. Now, imagine sharing that story with the world under the cloak of darkness. Join us as we open the Midnight Mailbox, revealing the emails, the whispered confessions, and the spine-tingling encounters that defy reason. Each episode is a journey into the paranormal, a peek behind the veil of our reality, and a celebration of the uncharted territories of the supernatural. So, grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and prepare to be captivated by the tales that defy explanation. Midnight Mailbox is here to make the unexplained a little less lonely and a lot more thrilling. Are you ready to step into the shadows and explore the mysteries that await in the heart of the night? Because, my friends, the Midnight Mailbox is now open. Civil War Ghosts. The listener writes, "Hey there, Steve and listeners. So happy that you're doing these listener stories again. I really miss them. Gather around because I've got a wild tale from the 80s that'll give you the heebie-jeebies. It was me and my buddies, Jake and Brent, on a summer night in Alabama, headed to this haunted battlefield we'd heard about. I ain't one to buy into all this ghost hype, but this night, well, it was something else. We set up camp, cracked open some cold ones, and laughed off the eerie vibes. But then, it was like the woods started talking. Whispers like old soldiers chatting about war. At first, we thought maybe it was just the wind, but deep down, we knew better. Suddenly, a chill hit us, and we heard what sounded like distant drums, slow and mournful. We followed them to what must have been the battlefield's center, where moonlight danced on ancient gnarled trees. And there they were, ghostly soldiers, marching with a weight of sorrow in their eyes. One guy, in a gray uniform, gave me what appeared to be a spectral salute. It was like they were lost, just like us. The drums hit their peak, and then, poof, the soldiers vanished, leaving us in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the echoes of a long-gone war. We stumbled back to camp in a daze, packed up just as dawn was breaking, and hightailed it out of there. But that haunted night, it stuck in my head like a catchy tune that you just can't shake. So there it is, my brush with ghostly soldiers in the 1980s. Did we really cross paths with the past? Who knows? Anyway, keep those lights on and catch you on the creepy flip side. Thanks again. Signed, George. College UFO Encounter. Hey Steve, love the show and thought I'd toss my hat into the ring with a wild story that still gives me the chills. So, back in college, I had this totally bizarre run-in with a UFO. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but hear me out. It was a crisp fall night, and I'm strolling back to my dorm after a late-night library sesh. Everything's chill until I spot this weird light in the sky. At first, I'm thinking, oh, it's just a plane doing plane things. But nope, this thing's playing hopscotch up there, zigzagging like it's on a joyride. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to make sense of the cosmic disco show. The light gets brighter, and I swear the air feels electric or something. My heart's about to beat out of my chest. And here's where it gets fuzzy. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly, it was gone. The light disappeared faster than I could imagine. I shake my head, try to collect myself, and notice it's completely quiet. No usual night sounds, just silence. I glance at my watch, and it's like I've lost a pretty good chunk of time, like a plot hole in my life story. Next day, I told my friends, expected a "whoa, that's nuts," but instead, I get a laugh track. They blame caffeine and stress. I even hit the books digging into the UFO tales, feeling like a character out of a paranormal TV show. I can't explain it. Was it a caffeine-induced space trip, or did I witness something out of E.T.? I've read up on other folks' stories, and it turns out I'm not alone in this weird cosmic club. I'm not saying it's little green men, but hey, maybe there's more to the night sky than meets the eye. Please keep the spookiness rolling on the podcast. Cheers, your friend, Andy. Hat Man encounter. Here's what happened. One night, I was in bed and couldn't sleep. It felt kind of weird, you know? The room was super dark, and it was all quiet and spooky. And suddenly, I got this creepy feeling, like I wasn't alone. I peeked to the end of my bed, and guess what? There was this tall, shadowy figure in a big hat. Yep, the Hat Man. He looked pretty scary with that hat, making his face all shadowy. I got really, really scared. The Hat Man had this bad vibe, and it felt like the room was getting all stuffy. I tried to breathe, but it was hard. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, but nope, the Hat Man stuck around, just standing there at the end of my bed. I could feel him looking at me, even though I couldn't see his face. And then the room got cold, and it felt like something heavy on my chest. It was like the Hat Man was taking all the air out of the room, and I couldn't breathe right. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't get my voice to work. It felt like forever that he just stayed there. I could tell he wasn't a nice person. He had this dark and mean feeling, almost demonic. I closed my eyes, hoping he'd be gone when I opened them. When I was finally brave enough to peek again, he was gone. But I still felt scared. It was all weird and made me think a lot. Whether it was just my mind playing tricks or something spooky, I couldn't forget about the Hat Man. It was like this strange thing that stuck with me. Thank you for letting me share my story. Signed, Anonymous. The Haunted Dairy Farm. Hey Steve, glad you're taking stories again. I've got one about an abandoned dairy farm in rural Ohio that'll make your hair stand on end. There was a bunch of us, fueled by a mix of curiosity and some courage. We decided to check out this old farm that's been sitting there almost like a forgotten ghost town. Rolled up in our truck, parked a good distance away to avoid getting caught trespassing. Armed with flashlights and hopefully nerves of steel, we made our way through this creaky gate that sounded like it was straight out of a horror movie. The night was dark as sin, clouds hiding the moon, and the whole scene felt like something out of a Stephen King novel. As we approached these old barns, the smell hit us. A weird mix of damp hay and something sour that made my stomach turn. The air felt thick, and the only sound was the occasional crunch of gravel under our boots. And then we heard it, this low, creepy moan that sent shivers down our spine. It wasn't an animal sound, mind you, but something straight out of a paranormal book. Normally, I don't even believe in stuff like this, but there was something in the air that night. There were shadows playing tricks. The air felt like it does sometimes before a storm. We tried to laugh it off, made some jokes, but deep down, we were all getting really nervous. We wandered through the farm, checking out the barns, and stumbled upon the old milking parlor, a place that smelled like death warmed over. I swear, I heard whispers in the wind, telling tales of days gone by. And in the flickering light, I caught a glimpse of shadowy figures moving just out of sight, like in my peripheral vision. Creepy, huh? But the real freak-out happened in the farmhouse. Inside, the temperature dropped like crazy, and we started feeling watched. Footsteps echoed behind us, but every time we turned around, there was no one or nothing there. Classic haunted house type stuff. In one of the rooms, we found this old photo album that gave us the serious creeps. Pictures of a family, kids, cows, like a snapshot of a long-lost time. And there was this picture of a woman staring at me like she had a bone to pick. I just couldn't shake the feeling that she was the source of those mournful mourns we'd heard earlier. We decided to bail, but as we headed out, things got even weirder. Now the air crackled with energy, and the shadows in my peripheral vision were going crazy. And I swear, I felt a cold hand on my arm. We ran out of there like our lives depended on it. It was like the whispers chased us out of there. I can't explain what happened that night, whether it was the spirits of the past or just our imaginations running wild. But one thing's for sure, that old dairy farm's got some serious spooky vibes. So, if you ever find yourselves in rural Ohio and hear about an abandoned farm, take my advice and steer clear. It ain't a place for the faint of heart. Signed, Adam. The Haunted Rocking Chair. Hello, people. I've got a crazy story for you. So, a couple weeks ago, I found an old rocking chair in a thrift store. Well, turns out I believe it's haunted. Yeah, I know, sounds like I'm cooking up a horror movie plot, but stick with me. From the beginning, the chair was all creaky, and I'd occasionally catch it rocking by itself. Not like a gentle sway, but a full-on I'm doing my own thing kind of vibe. At first, I thought it was probably the wind or a draft in the house or something. But then I started to hear what sounded like whispers. I'm not joking. Whispers, like the chair had its own secret gossip club. It sounded like it was saying things like, "Why did you bring me here?" or "I don't want to be in this place." I thought I was losing my mind. And you know what else? The chair played musical chairs when I wasn't looking. I'd leave it in the living room, and the next day, bam, it'd be back in my room, rocking away. I swear, it was like it had a GPS set for my bedroom. Creepy, huh? Now let's talk about nightmares. Every time I dozed off near that thing, I had these crazy dreams about a shadowy figure watching me. It was like a horror movie marathon in my head every night. I even tried recording the whispers just to make sure I wasn't going bonkers, but I didn't get anything substantial. Things really hit the fan one night, and the chair went berserk, rocking like it was auditioning for a horror movie. The room turned ice cold, and I saw some sort of shadowy figure. I couldn't even scream. I felt like the star of a low-budget ghost movie. That was it for me. I grabbed the chair and put it outside like it was on fire, and the next day dropped it off back at the thrift store. Since then, it's been all quiet on the spooky front. No more whispers, no more ghostly rocking sessions, and definitely no more nightmares. I did do a little detective work, though, and found out from the lady at the thrift store that I'd originally purchased the chair from that it used to belong to some lady who met a super creepy end. Call me crazy, but I'm officially on Team Haunted Chair now. Lesson learned. Vintage charm might come with a side of ghostly drama. From now on, I'm sticking to IKEA furniture. At least their chairs don't have a ghost mode. Thanks for reading my story, Annie. Hey there. Glad to see you doing the listener stories again. Here's mine. Imagine Savannah, Georgia, back in the 1980s. It's a place dripping with Spanish moss, where every house seemed to whisper secrets. Now, my childhood home, well, it wasn't your typical haunted house. It was like living in a Southern Gothic horror novel. I remember one night, I was about 10, lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when this wail started floating through the air. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks, but it started sounding like a ghostly woman singing the blues. I mean, who knew ghosts had a thing for blues tunes? But that was just the warm-up act. I'd wake up to shadows doing a mysterious tango in the corners of my room. Mischievous little imps, I swear. And there were the footsteps, like an invisible party happening every night. Confederate soldiers with a slow march, flappers with a jittery shuffle. Now, why didn't we hightail it out of there, you ask? Well, ghosts don't come with eviction notices, my friend. We were stuck with our spectral roommates, who'd occasionally rearrange my toys like they were having a ghostly play date. It eventually became our normal, the paranormal, like living with the weirdest roommates ever. I finally got the guts to ask my grandma about the house's history. Turns out it had seen more action than I ever imagined. A Civil War hospital, a Prohibition speakeasy, you name it. No wonder we had such haunted goings-on. Like I said, as the years passed, we just got used to it. Ghostly shenanigans were just a part of life in Savannah. like sweet tea and Sunday dinners. We coexisted, each respecting the other's space, for the most part. Sometimes I'd leave out biscuits for the Southern Belle ghost and hope that in return she'd serenade me with some of those otherworldly blues. We eventually moved out, though, leaving behind the ghosts and the memories. Still live in Savannah, but every time I stroll through the neighborhood where we used to live, I can't help but wonder if those ghosts are still hanging out on the moonlit balcony of our old house. Well, that's my tale of growing up in a haunted house in Savannah, where ghosts are as real as the moss on those ancient oaks. If you ever catch a whiff of blues on a Savannah breeze, just know it might be the ghost of a Southern belle getting down with the afterlife. Thanks for reading my story. Signed, Anonymous. The Old Truck. Hey there. Years and years ago, I was this little dude tearing around my uncle's farm in Ohio. Now this farm was like a spooky adventure waiting to happen. So one day, I'm out rambling around, and I stumble upon this beat-up old pickup in the weeds out behind the barn. The thing looked like it had survived a tornado, but there was something off about it. I swear you could feel it in the air. Had a huge creep factor. I was just waiting for mysterious music to start, you know? Being the brave, or maybe just dumb kid that I was, I decided to investigate this truck closer. When I got up near it, the air suddenly felt all charged and staticky, and the barn doors started creaking like they're in some movie. I took a peek inside the dusty window of the truck, and there, to my surprise, there's this ghostly farmer dude in the driver's seat. Overalls, worn out hat, the whole deal. I'm freaking out, thinking my eyes are playing tricks on me. But he just sits there and keeps on staring straight ahead. Fear? Oh yeah, it hit me hard, but I can't look away. Eventually, the paralysis broke, and I stumbled my way back to the farmhouse. I told my uncle about what I'd seen, but he didn't buy it for a second. Kids and their wild imaginations, right? But man, every time I passed that truck, I swear it had this ghostly aura. Fast forward to today, thinking about that old Ohio farm gives me the willies. The haunted pickup with its ghostly farmer, it's one of those stories that just stays with you. Maybe the past really does have a way of hanging around, like that old truck rusting into the ground on my uncle's farm. Signed, Anonymous. The Headless Man. Hey Steve, love your show. So I've got a creepy story to tell you about this crazy thing that happened to me back in the day. I was in Iowa, probably around 95, cornfields and a bunch of clueless kids thinking they're invincible. There was a corn maze in the neighborhood, and we decided to wander through it in the dead of night, thinking we were on some next-level adventure. But oh boy, did it take a turn for the bizarre. It was so quiet, it was even as if the crickets took a break. And then we heard this creepy thudding sound, like someone stomping around with no care in the world. Lo and behold, somewhere in the middle of the corn maze, there he was, a guy without a head, just strolling around like he was out for a casual evening walk. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. We were frozen, just watching this headless guy doing his thing. He looked disheveled, but he moved with purpose, even without a head. We didn't dare to make a peep, thinking the thing might come after us. After what felt like an eternity, he sort of disappeared into the dark, and the cornfield went back to its eerie silence. We got the heck out of there, didn't say much, just trying to process what the heck we'd just witnessed. It messed with our heads for weeks. We just couldn't shake off that feeling that we stumbled upon something way beyond our imagination. It wasn't our mind playing tricks. We legitimately had a supernatural encounter with a headless man in the corn. I guess as time passed, I kind of buried the memory, but if I stop and think about it long enough, it still haunts me, sometimes when I least expect it. That cornfield, that corn maze, our once upon a time playground, turned into this weird, mysterious spot. I thought this tale might fit in with your creepy podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers, your friend, Chester. Massachusetts Shadows. Dear Midnight Mailbox, hope you're doing awesome. Have I got a story to share with you? It's about something that happened in a super old colonial house in Massachusetts. It was in the winter of 2003. There was a chill in the air, and I'm holed up in this ancient house, knee-deep in transcribing manuscripts. Now, this house wasn't just old. It was practically dripping with history. It all started one evening when I was burning the midnight oil in the study. The fireplace was throwing shadows on the wall like it was putting on some kind of show, and that's when I first noticed them. Shadows, not from the fireplace, but shadow figures doing their thing in the kitchen. I know that sounds crazy. These shadows that I saw, they were weirdly human-shaped, but totally featureless. Imagine a shadow, but without the details. It was like they were stuck in limbo between form and no form at all. I was just too curious or maybe stubborn to be scared at that time. After that, for many nights, these shadows would just show up, just kind of moving around like they were up to something. They seemed to love hanging out near the fireplace, soaking up the warmth like they were reliving some old memories. And I'm just here going through these books, trying not to completely lose my mind. Eventually, though, I went full detective mode, dug into the history of the house. Turns out, it had more skeleton in its closet than I thought. Family sagas, secret affairs, you name it. This place had seen it all. The shadows, it seemed, were like the keepers of these ancient stories. Sometimes they'd do a silent reenactment in the kitchen, like it was their own personal stage. And now the really crazy part, these shadows weren't just random blips. They seemed to acknowledge me in their own shadowy way. It was like we had this unspoken understanding. I'm typing away at these old stories. It felt like they were saying, yeah, you get us. Now, I'm not trying to convince you I was hanging out with Casper's extended family or anything, but there was this strange peace in the kitchen during those nightly spectacles. It was like the shadows and I were sharing this unspoken connection, bridging the gap between the living and whatever dimension they were from. Again, it's not about convincing anyone of what was happening in that colonial kitchen. It's more about the crazy goings-on between what we know and what's just beyond our grasp. This old house in Massachusetts, with its creaky floors and dark interior, became the silent witness to these things that defied the ticking clock. Well, there it is. My run-in with these shadows in a kitchen in an old house in Massachusetts. However you choose to see it, the mystery lives on. Here's to embracing the enigma and keeping the conversation spooky. Thank you for reading my story. Signed, Anonymous. The old house on the outskirts of town. Here's my strange encounter. It was years and years ago when I was in my teens. I'd just finished high school, and one of my buddies lived in this old house on the outskirts of town. One night, things got crazy. I was crashing at his place, just shooting the breeze, and we were playing some tunes on his record player. Suddenly, we noticed these weird shadows moving around. Was it just our imagination? Nah, it was something else. These shadowy figures started appearing out of nowhere, like people made out of pure darkness. They didn't have any real features, just dark shapes that seemed to move in and out of the room. I remember the chill running down my spine like something wasn't right. We tried to ignore it and blamed it on the lights or whatever, but these shadow folks, they stuck around. They weren't doing anything, just lingering and giving us these really strange vibes. It was like they were watching us, even though they didn't have any eyes, if that makes any sense. There were times when the room would get cold and felt heavy. We tried talking to them, asking if they were there for a reason or something, but they just stayed silent shadows. And man, it was a trip. We couldn't figure out what was going on. We thought about bolting out of there. We were just kind of frozen, like scared to move. But then when we thought about it, where would we go? It was my friend's house. Eventually, after what felt like forever, the shadows eventually began to fade away. After they had gone, we were just left there, scratching our heads and wondering if we'd just lived through some strange supernatural episode. Never saw those shadow people again, but something like that, it stays with you, like some kind of weird puzzle from your past. Even with my high school education, I just couldn't wrap my head around what happened on those nights. Thank you for reading my story. If anybody else has had similar encounters, I hope they'll send theirs in too. Signed, Larry. A sleep paralysis encounter. Hey Steve, hope this email finds you chilling and ready for some spooky stories. So here's the deal. I've been going through some seriously weird stuff at night, and I figured you or your audience might appreciate the bizarre tale. On a regular night, I'm out like a light after a day of high school chaos. But then, I start waking up, or at least I think I am. Turns out, my body's on vacation mode, but my mind is wide awake, playing hide and seek, if you will. And oh boy, it gets weirder. There's this pressure on my chest, like someone decided my rib cage is the comfiest spot in town. It's not just the immobility, it's the feeling that there is some invisible guest sitting on me, throwing a party on my bed without an invitation. Now, the first time it happened, I thought, okay, this was just some sort of freak incident. But nope, it soon became a nightly thing. It's like my body no longer belongs to me at night when I go to sleep. And hallucinations. I guess they're hallucinations. Shadowy figures in my room gives me the kind of shivers that you get from reading the scariest ghost story. So I Googled it, and turns out it's called sleep paralysis. Apparently, stress is the trigger, and with the high school drama and family chaos, it's like my brain is throwing a sleep-deprived party. Although some people claim it's a supernatural thing. I've tried everything. New sleeping positions, calming bedtime routines, you name it. But this thing, it's got a mind of its own. It's like my brain's the puppet master, and I'm just along for a spooky ride. Some people even call it the old hag syndrome. Talking to my friends about it feels awkward. I mean, how do you explain that you're being haunted by invisible creatures? They'd probably think I've been watching too much television. So I'm keeping it on the down low, smiling by day and dreading the night. I've read about therapy and meds helping, but it feels like slapping a Band-Aid on a deeper issue. Call me stubborn, but I'm not ready to go down the medical path just yet. Feels like admitting defeat, you know? The reason why I'm spilling this to you and your audience is I thought maybe putting it into words will lift the creepy cloud. Steve, if you've got any thoughts or advice, or any of your audience, I'm all ears. Thank you for letting me share my personal horror story. Looking forward to more spooky episodes. Sincerely, Dwayne. Hi, Steve. I saw your call for stories for Midnight Mailbox, and I thought I'd send you one of my strange encounters. This is totally serious, and it really happened. It was the weirdest hiking trip of my life. I was out in the tall trees, the ones that make you feel like you're in some giant's backyard. Deep, dark woods straight out of a movie, where the sunlight barely pokes through. I usually don't get scared, but on this hike, I was frightened out of my wits. First of all, I'd strayed from the usual trail. Classic mistake, I know. But curiosity had gotten the better of me. The deeper into the woods I went, the quieter it got. Suddenly, I noticed there were no bird sounds, no leaf rustling, nothing. Just this creepy silence that was all around me. Then, all of a sudden, I stepped into a clearing. Sunlight beaming through the trees, and in the middle, an ancient-looking circle of stones. It wasn't very big, but it was indeed placed there by human hands. As I'm circling these rocks, I spot these funky symbols etched into them. Not gonna lie, it looked like some kind of bizarre alien tic-tac-toe game. And then I hear what sounds like people chatting in the distance. I'm standing there thinking, what is happening? It sounded ancient. I felt this weird energy, but that's what happened. The next strange thing that was part of this hike, I'm on this narrow trail, trees closing in like a tunnel, and I hear footsteps behind me, leaves crunching, but every time I stop, it stops. I turn, nothing. It's just me, my echoing footsteps, and this feeling of being watched. And then, off in the trees, I see a misty figure. I'm squinting, making sure that my mind's not playing tricks. But no, it's a shadowy somebody or something just standing there. I wanted to call out, but it was like my voice was gone. I started to take a step closer, and it was gone. I'm standing there with my heart racing, wondering what I just had a close encounter with. The last part of this particular hiking adventure, I'd set up camp by a stream and cooked up some beans out of a can when I hear like this soft humming noise. And again, I'm like, what is that? I followed the sound to another clearing, but this time it was full of fireflies. If you've ever seen the synchronous fireflies of the Smokies, that's what it looked like. It looked like they were making these crazy patterns in the air. Then, in the same clearing, a deer wanders through. Not an average deer. This deer was blacker than black, and its eyes were glowing. And the deer and I, we had this deep moment, locked eyes and all that, like the forest is putting on a show just for me. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep, and when morning breaks, it's back to normal. I can hear birds chirping, leaves rustling in the trees. The stone circle's still there, but it looks benign and old, with the shadow figure and the whispers all gone, like some kind of bizarre dream. I packed up my camp, thinking the trail back home might not even be there, but thankfully it was. I can't explain the things that happened, but it felt like I crashed a secret party in the woods. Either I had some sort of weird hallucination, or Mother Nature is hiding some wild secrets. If you'd like to hear more stories, let me know. You won't believe the other things that have happened to me. Thanks again for reading my story, and I look forward to the show. Signed, Anonymous. Well, friends, I responded back to this anonymous listener, and they sent me another story. This time he writes, once more, I decided to take a solo hike in the woods. Right now, I get chills just thinking about it. I wandered into the woods thinking, it's going to be a chill day of communing with nature. I couldn't have been more wrong. The air seemed thick, like walking through molasses, and the leaves were crunching under my feet a lot louder than they normally do. But then, somewhere off in the distance, I started hearing voices. Not just any voices, but voices that sounded like my Aunt Mary and my best friend Sarah, and once, even my own voice. What in the world was going on? So I start calling out, asking who's there. All I get back is this echo of my own voice. But it gets stranger. The voices start mimicking conversations I've had with people, laughing at inside jokes, and even bringing up embarrassing moments I thought were buried deep in my memory vault. I finally decided just to sit down and take a breather on a fallen log, thinking I'll figure out what's going on. But that's when the voices continued whispering, secrets, personal stuff, like family skeletons and old crushes. It's like the woods turned into my therapist. And if that wasn't enough, I caught a glimpse of something moving between the trees, some kind of shadowy figure that would occasionally peek out. I tried to spot it, but it's like chasing smoke. I can see it out of the corner of my eye, but when I look directly at it, there's nothing there. I decided the best thing for me to do was to get out of there, and that's what I did. As I headed back to civilization at a steady clip, the voices faded away. It's like the woods knew that it had messed with my head long enough and decided to let me off the hook. I don't know what happened, and I'm not sure I want to. Maybe the woods have a secret society of their own, or maybe I just stumbled into some ghostly place. Either way, I don't think I'll be venturing back into the great unknown anytime soon, not alone anyway. So what do y'all think? Am I crazy, or did I stumble into a forest freak show? I can't wait to hear your comments. Signed, Anonymous. The Black Mass. Hi, Steve. So glad you've joined us here in New England. I have a story from my childhood that I'd like to share for your new show. During my childhood, I lived in a small town in Massachusetts that held great historical significance. It was the birthplace of the term Minutemen, which originated during the Revolutionary War. As I grew older, I learned from a friend who lived nearby that he'd seen Revolutionary War soldiers in the woods behind his house preparing for battle. When I was 3 years old, my mother and I moved into an apartment and were excited to have our own little space. I'm now 38 years old, but I vividly remember it all as if it happened yesterday. I remember having problems sleeping immediately after we moved in. I developed night terrors and would wake up in the middle of the night at the same time, 3 a.m., experiencing utter terror. I was so young that I couldn't rationalize what was going on and would scream for my mother to get me and take me to her room. Every night at the same time, this happened. It'd be like I was woken up out of a sound sleep because of sheer terror and just had to get out of that room. In my mom's room, I would hear strange music coming from nowhere in the silence of the night and see bizarre flashing lights soaring around the room. It's a wonder I ever slept at all. Flash forward 2 years. At this point, I'm 5 years old. This one particular night, I went to bed and woke up, as you guessed it, at 3 a.m. So I'm just laying in bed, but only this time, I'm not screaming for my mother. I'm laying there waiting, as if something is going to happen. I can sense it in my soul. All of a sudden, in the pure silence of the night, I heard the knob turn and the door to my room opened. The door just glided extremely slowly across the carpeted floor. Something in my gut told me not to look. I knew if I looked, whatever I saw looking back at me would ruin me forever. So I just lay there, silently staring at the wall, while doing everything I could to avoid looking at the door. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, the clamorous noise echoing the darkness. I lay in fear and eventually, somehow, rocked myself to sleep. When I woke up the following morning, I immediately asked my mother if she'd gone in to check on me the previous night. She said no, because she had been asleep herself, probably ecstatic not to have been disturbed for once. The look of sheer terror on my face must have been one for the books, because someone or something definitely opened that door last night. I was wide awake. I know I was. I heard that door open and physically felt someone or something standing there looking at me. If it wasn't my mom, then who was it? It was just the two of us living there. I knew she wasn't lying. She was always honest with me. I try to forget this experience and go on with life. Now, my mom loved having fish tanks and all varieties of fish since we weren't allowed to have other pets where we lived. The fish would just keep dying. I know fish die, and it could be a coincidence, but my mom knew how to take care of them, and it was just odd how frequently it was happening. We came home one day, and all of them were dead. All of them. My mom just shrugged, said she had no idea what happened, and chalked it off to bacteria or something in the water. That's not what I think it was. I went to bed that night and woke up, you guessed it, at the same time, 3 a.m. I groggily looked over to my closet, which was directly across from my bed, and saw through the darkness a huge black shadow or black mass just hovering over the closet. This thing was massive and the blackest black I've ever seen to this day. I was paralyzed with fear and screamed for my mother, who rushed in to see what was wrong. And, to my horror, she saw it too. She hurriedly turned the light on, and the black mass still hovered over the closet. Looking back as an adult, I know how terrified she must have been. She didn't want me to be scared, though, and I commend her for this. So she just got in my bed with me, pulled the covers up over us both, and held me close until we finally fell asleep. I have no idea how long that thing hovered there. To this day, I have no idea what we saw that night or what was actually happening there. Whatever was there didn't seem to have any good intentions for us, and we ultimately moved not long after that terrifying night. It frightens me to think that something was actually watching me on all those sleepless nights and just preying on my innocence. Unfortunately, my mom is not with us anymore, but I asked her about that night about 15 years ago, and she remembered it vividly but could not explain it. I could tell she was uncomfortable talking about it, and she hurriedly changed the subject. I was hoping she said she didn't remember, so it could all be chalked up to my young, wild imagination. But her confirming that it happened chills me to the core to this day. If you ever find yourself in central Massachusetts, beware. You never know what might be watching you while you sleep. I hope you enjoy this story. Signed, Parker. Ouija board story. I bought this Ouija board when I was 19, so in the year of 2018. My friend and I saw it on Amazon for cheap and grabbed it because we were planning a trip to Centralia in Pennsylvania and thought we could use it there. Fast forward to about a week later, we end up in Centralia, and we're in a graveyard during sunset at the grave of a young girl named Jane. She was supposedly known as one of the first victims there, and I believe her uncle may have been responsible for what happened to her in the mines before the fires had started. We soon got a lot of activity after asking if Jane was there. The Ouija board answered that it was Jane, but almost every question, it either spelled Jane or the number 7, with both the numbers or letters. We thought it was weird because we didn't understand what 7 had to do with anything. This went on for almost an hour until we said goodbye and thought to try our spirit box. The spirit box then kept yelling out the same thing over again, and soon after went completely silent and wouldn't work again until we left the cemetery. We thought nothing of it and went back home to Massachusetts the next day. We wanted to try it again to see if it was real or if we were scaring ourselves, so we went to the graveyard that my grandmother was buried in and tried to reach her. We did not mention her name or anything, so nothing could try and trick us, and we only got the same answers of Jane and the number 7 again. We closed out the session and drove to the closest McDonald's because it was only a mile away and we wanted to be somewhere where there was a lot of people. Curiosity kicked in and my friend opened the box to make sure we had put it away properly. And as she did that, my new 2016 Nissan Juke started to idle and the lights went crazy. To this day, until I traded in that car, my Juke would do that anytime it stopped, and it never did this before that day. We put it away and left it for a month or so in the trunk storage in my car. There is a place known as the Rocking Horse Graveyard in Massachusetts that we wanted to visit, and we have visited before. It's nothing scary, it's just people dropping off rocking horses, and the owner of the land moves them around in fun designs for a little girl that used to run a lemonade stand there. We've never had a scary experience here, but the Ouija board was still in my car. We went at night, so it was dark, and we both looked up and saw what we thought was a pole in the field, but then we both saw it move. I moved closer to get a better look in case it was someone that needed help. As I got closer, it disappeared completely in front of me, and we got too spooked to stay there. The next day, I was at work at 4 a.m. and I left around 12 to find out my brake lines were sliced and I couldn't use them. I don't know if that was because I was in a bad area or the Ouija board, but it still made me aware. That was the last time we noticed anything for a couple of months. I soon quit that job and worked with my sister, but we carpooled because she had car issues, so I moved into her apartment with her boyfriend and her young daughter. I had to empty my car because I was trying to trade it in, so I brought everything into the apartment. I didn't end up trading in that car yet, but I forgot everything from the car in my room at my sister's for a while. After about 3 days of the board being in their apartment, there was problems with their Xbox turning on and making strange noises at 3 a.m. on the dot. Every day, even if it was unplugged. My sister had also taken a picture of my niece while home alone, and in the background caught something standing very strangely in the hutch reflection behind. There was no TV or other person around at that time. The Xbox stopped doing that the day I moved out and took the board with me. I moved into my own place within the next couple months and obviously brought the board with me. Within the very first night, my kitchen cabinets would open and slam shut by themselves every time I shut off the lights for bed. This went on for months until my friend wanted to borrow the board because she was going back to Centralia with other friends. I stayed behind. I do not know experiences with the board in Pennsylvania this time, but she came back a week later, and one of her friends came up to visit from Florida. He didn't believe this thing would cause this much destruction, so he wanted to try it in his hotel room. Now, his hotel room was right next to a rock wall where it was believed that someone was buried in, so we thought that would be a good spot. We played and got something very cheerful at first until it started to spell out Jane and 7 again. Being curious, my friend broke out the spirit box again while me and my Florida friend kept the board going. She was getting the exact same answers as we were. She put the spirit box away and she put her hands back on the board and it started going crazy, going back and forth. I know Zozo is the demon of the board, but that's all it was spelling, and I didn't believe it until that day. We quickly ended the session, and as we said goodbye, all the hangers in the closet went crazy, and my friend was too scared to stay in there alone, so I spent the night, and we did not sleep at all that night. My sister was throwing a Halloween party, and my friend had brought the board, and we thought it could be used as a prop, but we never touched the planchette to the board. It has been at my sister's house ever since, and nothing happened that night, but since that day, the new Xbox has been turning on and off again, and we've all seen things walking around the house. Things are happening to this day as we've opened the box for the first time since Halloween, and within minutes, my sister's bearded dragon's tank started to smoke from the lamp that has never happened in the years that they've had him. Signed, Anonymous. Hi Steve, this is AJK from the YouTube channel The Retrospective Vault. When I was a child, my parents divorced and they both remarried eventually, and my mother and I, along with my new stepfamily, moved to a new house. The house was located near a real nice subdivision named Buck Lake in northern Illinois. This place was a nice place to move to. It was out in the country and very quiet. There was also no shortage of children to run around the neighborhood with. This area had a pond and creek that ran into Buck Lake that was man-made by a small dam. People could fish, swim, and canoe on the lake, and even ice skate in the winter months. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I don't remember how long I'd been living in the house when I had my first encounter. I woke up one night, and I could look out my bedroom door down the hall and into the kitchen. There stood two ghostly-looking figures next to the refrigerator. A third orb-looking thing was racing real fast around the soup tureen on top of the refrigerator. At my age and height, I thought the refrigerator was tall. The one ghostly figure standing next to the fridge was strangely contorted. It looked like it was bent in an awkward position. After that incident, I never slept with the bedroom door open. I don't understand why that house was haunted, but I could only guess. Either the previous owners invited them in, or the land around the area is cursed. Strange occurrences would happen to things in my room. I had a snow globe that was knocked over on the floor, which broke it. I would wake up with scratches on my body, and my mother would ask if I'd been playing rough with the dog. Another time, I was in my room, but thankfully not alone in the house. I had a mirror that hung over my dresser drawers that reflected in the hallway outside my bedroom. A small, pitch-black figure walked past my room in the hallway. It was short, maybe 3 feet tall. It was holding what looked like a stick with a chicken egg on the end of it. It scared me real bad, and I ran to the other side of the house where all the adults were. I don't know what was worse, seeing ghosts and being scared, or nobody believing me when I told them what I'd seen. As time went on, we moved to another house in town, and I could walk to school. I didn't see anything in the new house. It wouldn't be until years later as an adult that I would experience paranormal activity again. To be continued? Thanks, AJK, for sending that in, and absolutely, feel free to send us more stories of your personal encounters. That brings us to the end of our first episode of Midnight Mailbox, featuring your paranormal stories and strange encounters. Are you someone who's experienced the unexplainable, the eerie, or the downright mysterious? Have you, dear listener, ever had a paranormal encounter that sent shivers down your spine? If so, we want to hear from you for future episodes. We invite you to share your personal paranormal experiences. Email your stories to midnightmailbox13@gmail.com. This podcast aims to create a space where individuals from all walks of life can come together to share their unexplained encounters with the supernatural. Whether you've encountered ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, or anything else that defies rational explanation, we want to hear your story. Your first-hand experiences can be a source of intrigue, inspiration, and even comfort for those who may have had similar encounters. Thank you for being a part of this thrilling journey into the world of the paranormal. We can't wait to listen to your spooky tales. Stay safe out there. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time. Tell your animals I said hi. Hey, Steve Stockton back here live with you again on this rainy Christmas Eve here in New England. Thanks everybody again for joining us. Tattooed Biker Unexplained, welcome in. Now I had him on an episode of the radio show a while back. Go have a listen to that one, Tales of the Tattooed Biker. And coming up in about 15 minutes here, 10 minutes, the new episode with Paul Smith from Truth Proof will be on Ground Zero Radio. Go ahead and drop a link for you here. Starts at 9 o'clock, and just up at the top of the screen, I think it looks the same on the phone, there'll be a listen button. Click on that, and you'll hear the show. But before we part here, let me say hi to a few more people here. Dimensional Horse, how you doing? Good to see you back again. D-Rock, thanks again for becoming a member again. Even better the second time. Kyrie, Merry Christmas to you and your cats there. Tales of the Sonic Voyage, Downtown Terry Brown. I love those Christmas guitar album you had playing over there today. Beantown Patsy, how you doing? Good to see you. your guinea pigs. Say hi to them too. Hey, Chairnator, didn't realize you're still here. Lance Crockett, Merry Christmas to you and Ninja. And Brendan Chamberlain, Merry Christmas to you as well. I'm going to give a reading, a live reading here of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." That's what it's commonly known as. It's actually "A Visit from St. Nicholas" is the real name of it, and it's by Clement C. Moore. And I read this every year. Excuse me. My voice didn't go out. Little Duncan there. I'm a New Englander. You got to have my dunks. Read this, and then we'll all go over and listen to the radio show. I hope you've enjoyed this. Probably going to do another live stream tomorrow. Yeah, Chair Nader, I saw that. Thank you. Chair Nader, another great member. Go over and check his channel out. If you like some relaxing simulation gameplay over there. Good stuff. Love to watch him drive those trucks throughout the UK and beyond. But here we go with a visit from St. Nicholas, a.k.a. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. I'm going to put a little background up here behind me. If I can find it here. Let's see, I need to move it up here. Using a different software for this one. Okay, give me just a second to set this up here. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I hope this background works the way I expect it to. Sarah Claire, thank you for being a moderator. And switch over to this, and then I'll give you this story. You should still be able to hear me. Let me know right away in the chat if you can't hear me after a few seconds. But here we go. Whoops, and that's not the one I wanted to put up there. That is kind of Victorian looking, but it's this one. Hang on, I need to move it up behind me. Thought I had all this set up, but I rethought everything. There we go. So that's kind of Victorian, kind of Christmassy looking, right? A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up in a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly, then shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying a finger side of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, till his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this stream, Christmas Eve here. I was going to have a special video tomorrow, but because of some things that I had to do today and some stuff I've got to do tomorrow, I didn't get it put together. So for the first time, I'm going to have a live reading of a missing case, a Christmas mystery, no less. So that'll be live tomorrow. I'll probably do that at 6 too. First time doing it totally live like that from a script, so there may be flubs and mishaps, and my tongue gets tied, and who knows. But it'll be fun, and it'll be something for Christmas. Midwest Night Watchers, hey there, good to see you. Cheryl Anderson, Merry Christmas to you, and our condolences on your loss. Midwest Night Watchers and his wife, her channel, Chiro Sounds, they were my guests also on an episode of my radio show, Everything Out There. Again, that's on the Clyde Lewis Radio Network, Ground Zero Radio Network, and it starts in about 2 minutes. So I'm going to bid you all good night, Merry Christmas. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for all the super stickers and super chats. Welcome new members. If you're a channel member and you'd like to get free copies of my books, email me. I've already got one email requesting those. Now, those are PDF copies. But if you want the paperbacks, I've got signed, inscribed, and personally inscribed ones over on my Etsy shop. So again, have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see y'all tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for being here. I'll see you a little farther on down the trail. Tell your animals I said hi, and Merry Christmas. Good night, everybody. Thanks for being here. Lee G's going to play us out, but go check out the radio show. It starts in 1 minute. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Well, it's one thing to be upset with someone. Yeah, one thing to hold a grudge over one mistake. Oh, one mistake isn't much to make. It's one mistake. And you're sorry, you're so sorry, but it's just because